Proofread this, I didn't mean to notice him. Really, I didn't. But there he was, leaning casually against a lamppost across the street, hands shoved into the pockets of his dark jacket, blue eyes tracking me like some predator assessing its prey. It made me uneasy, the way his gaze followed me, even though I had no reason to know him. For all I knew, he was just another stranger in the city, but the chill creeping down my spine told me otherwise. I tried to ignore him, letting the rhythm of my heels against the cracked pavement keep me grounded. My phone buzzed in my hand, pulling me from the strange tension that had settled over me. A new email flagged urgent from an anonymous sender. They are watching. Truth is closer than you think. Midnight, the usual place. I froze. The usual place wasn't exactly public knowledge. Only Jamie and I had ever referred to it like that. How the hell did someone know? My pulse quickened, and 1,000 warnings screamed in my head, but curiosity, it always wins, pushed me forward. The city was alive with neon and noise. Cars honked, pedestrians chattered, and the scent of rain-damp asphalt mixed with the faint perfume of street vendors selling everything from roasted chestnuts to late-night noodles. I kept moving, eyes darting to him every few steps. Lucas Kane, or was it? I didn't even know his name yet, but the name kept forming in my mind, stubborn and persistent. There was something familiar, almost magnetic about him, and I hated the way my chest warmed at the thought. I reached the little cafe tucked between two high-rises, the one with flickering orange neon and the smell of strong coffee that always made me feel like the world slowed down, if only for a moment. The door jingled behind me, and I scanned the room. Empty, except for a couple of night owls hunched over laptops and a man sitting in the corner, shadows hiding most of his face. He didn't move. I sat at the farthest table, laptop open, pretending to check emails while my mind raced. The tip had said midnight, and that meant whoever had sent it would arrive soon, or I'd have a hell of an empty street to walk back through if they didn't. The cafe's clock ticked toward 12, and the sense of being watched never left me. Then, just as I was starting to convince myself I had imagined Lucas, the door opened again. The chime was soft, almost polite, and the bell in my chest skipped a beat. He walked in, shoulders relaxed, hands tucked into his jacket just like before, but this time he scanned the cafe with a calculated precision. When his gaze met mine, I felt it like a jolt, a sudden recognition that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Are you Ava Sinclair?" His voice was low, smooth, and somehow both a question and a statement. "Yes," I said, keeping my tone neutral, even though every instinct in my body screamed to run or demand answers. "And you are?" He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. Lucas Kane." Of course. The name fit, the presence fit. Everything about him fit too neatly for it to be coincidental. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, hands resting on the table as if we had been planning this meeting for weeks. "You're not alone in this," he said, his eyes scanning the room before settling back on mine. "There are people who want what you're digging into, people who will go to extreme lengths to make sure it stays buried." I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. He wasn't exaggerating. The tip wasn't just a casual rumor or gossip meant to spice up my day, it was a warning. And the fact that he knew, the fact that he had shown up here, meant he was somehow involved or at least close enough to danger that my pulse shouldn't be racing this fast if I wanted to survive the night. "What exactly am I digging into?" I asked, testing the waters, though part of me already knew the answer would be complicated. Lucas leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "There's a scandal buried deep, and it touches people you might think you know. People in power. People who aren't afraid to cross lines you wouldn't believe existed. I can help you, but you'll have to trust me." I wanted to laugh. Trust. That word had been toxic for me ever since my last heartbreak, back when someone I thought I could rely on had shattered every bit of faith I had in connection. But something about him, the way he carried authority and a quiet intensity, made me want to believe just a little. "Why me?" I asked. "Why not the police or someone else?" "Because they won't listen to anyone," he said, eyes sharp and unflinching. "And because you see things differently. You notice details, connections that others dismiss. You dig, you ask questions. And right now, you're the only one who can make them pay attention before it's too late." A shiver ran down my spine, part fear, part excitement. My mind immediately flashed to Serena. She was the first person I thought of when danger or betrayal came into play. Something told me she was already entwined in this, probably watching, probably smiling behind a mask I couldn't see yet. "I don't even know if I can trust you," I said cautiously, leaning back, trying to regain a fraction of control. "I don't know anything about you." Lucas's smile widened slightly, not the friendly kind, but the one that held secrets. "And that's exactly why you need me. For now, just know that whoever sent that email, they didn't send it lightly. And whoever wants this hidden, they'll stop at nothing." The cafe door jingled again, though no one entered this time. The wind outside picked up, rattling the neon sign in the window. I felt the prickle of unease crawl along my neck. Something about the city tonight felt different, almost conspiratorial, like the walls themselves were whispering secrets. I closed my laptop slowly, tucking it into my bag, and looked at him fully for the first time. Lucas Kane, tall, enigmatic, dangerous, and frustratingly magnetic. The kind of man who makes you want to ask questions you're terrified of knowing the answers to. "Okay," I said finally, voice firmer than I felt. "I'll play along for now, but I have my rules." "Good," he said, leaning back, relaxed again. "Rules are important, but remember this. The line between hunter and hunted is thinner than you think, and tonight it's already crossed." I felt the weight of his words settle over me like a fog, thick and suffocating. Outside, the city pulsed with life, oblivious to the storm that was already brewing in its shadows. I had no idea what I had just signed up for, and the rational part of my brain screamed at me to run, to ignore the email, to forget the man with the piercing blue eyes. But the other part, the part that had always chased truths, even when it hurt, smiled faintly and leaned forward, ready to step into the chaos. Because something told me this was only the beginning, and from somewhere deep in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching us both, waiting for the exact moment to strike. The lamppost across the street flickered, shadows twisted, and I knew, with a certainty I couldn't ignore, that tonight would change everything. As I left the cafe, the feeling of being followed intensified. Somewhere in the shadows, Serena was already moving, plotting, and I had no idea just how close danger truly was, or how entangled Lucas Kane was about to make my life. The first meeting. The city never felt smaller than the moment I stepped outside the cafe and saw him, Lucas Kane, still standing across the street, but this time closer, not hiding behind shadows. The wind tugged at my coat, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise. His piercing blue eyes locked onto mine, calm and calculated, like he had been expecting me to follow. I didn't want to. I told myself I should walk away, blend into the throng of night owls and taxis. But the curiosity that always led me into trouble outweighed my fear. Step by step, I crossed the street, heels clicking on wet asphalt, my grip tightening around the strap of my bag. He didn't move as I approached, just watched, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. When I was only a few feet away, he finally spoke, low and deliberate. "You're fast," he said, almost teasing, though the underlying seriousness made me tense. "I don't like being followed," I replied, keeping my tone even. My heart was still hammering from the adrenaline spike, but I needed him to see I wasn't afraid. Lucas chuckled softly. "Fair enough, but I wasn't following, I was observing." Observing? The word sounded harmless, but it carried weight and unspoken warning. He tilted his head, studying me, and I realized he knew more than he let on. "Then why are you here?" I asked, eyes narrowing. "If it's about the email, then let's cut to it. I don't have time for games." "No games," he said, raising his hand slightly, palms open. "I'm here because it's already started. Things are moving faster than you think, and someone's paying attention to you. Maybe more closely than I would like." I swallowed, remembering the feeling of being watched since that email arrived. The hairs on my arms prickled. Someone like who? His eyes darkened for a moment, hinting at secrets he wasn't ready to share. Like someone who doesn't want the truth to come out, someone dangerous, and you're too close to it, too close for comfort. I clenched my jaw. Dangerous. That could mean anyone with influence, money, or the right connections. My career in investigative journalism had taught me that danger often wore a polite smile and a tailored suit. But something about him, he wasn't polite exactly. He was direct, sharp, and made it impossible to look away. I exhaled and decided to test him. "And you're going to protect me." He leaned slightly closer, voice dropping. "I can help you avoid mistakes." but I can't protect you from everyone. You'll have to trust me when the time comes." Trust, that word tightened something in my chest. I had spent years building walls around myself, careful never to let anyone get close enough to hurt me. Yet here was Lucas Kane, a man I'd met only minutes ago, telling me I'd need to trust him. Part of me wanted to walk away, leave the night, the city, and whatever trouble was creeping toward me. But the other part, the part that chased the truth even when it was dangerous, kept my feet planted. "Fine," I said finally, keeping my voice steady. "But I need details. I don't do anything half-assed." He nodded as if he expected that. "Good, I like that about you. The problem is I can't give you everything. Not yet. Too many eyes, too many ears, but I can give you a starting point." He handed me a small slip of paper. On it was a name and a location. Evelyn Hart, 47 Wren Street, midnight. I frowned. Who is she? A contact. She has information you need. Information about the people who want to keep things buried. She's cautious, smart, and she trusts few. She trusts me enough to meet you, though. That's all you need to know for now. I studied the name, committing it to memory. Evelyn Hart. It sounded like someone who belonged in the shadows, someone who had survived long enough to learn the rules of this dangerous game. I slipped the note into my coat pocket, my mind already spinning with possibilities and scenarios. "And what do I do if someone's watching me tonight?" I asked, lowering my voice. Lucas's gaze sharpened. "Then you stay alert. Pay attention to the details. Notice things people assume are meaningless. That's how you survive. That's how you win." I nodded slowly, trying to absorb everything. My heart still raced, but I felt a flicker of determination ignite. I had survived tough stories before, faced threats that should have crushed me, but tonight felt different. This wasn't just about an exposé anymore. This was personal. A sudden noise, metal clanging against concrete, made me flinch. I glanced toward the alley beside the cafe. Shadows shifted, but no one emerged. Still, the sense of being observed intensified. I was hyper-aware now, every sound amplified, every movement suspicious. "Do you always have to make everything feel like a thriller?" I muttered, mostly to myself. Lucas smirked, not offended. "I don't, but life has a way of turning into one if you chase the truth as relentlessly as you do." I bit back a retort, realizing he wasn't wrong. Life indeed had a habit of spiraling into chaos when you dug too deep. My career, my instincts, they were all about digging, uncovering, exposing. But for some reason, this time, I didn't feel entirely in control. Lucas Kane had a presence that made it impossible to ignore him or the danger he hinted at. "All right," I said, straightening my coat. "I'll meet Evelyn Hart, midnight, but I want you to know something." "Go on." "I don't trust easily, and I don't forgive easily. If this goes south," my voice faltered slightly, but I continued, "then I'll handle it my way." Lucas studied me, his gaze almost approving. "I wouldn't have it any other way. Just be careful, and don't underestimate Serena Voss. She's clever, and she's already moving. You'll feel her shadow before you even see her." My stomach nodded at the name, Serena. I had expected trouble to arise, but knowing her was already in play made the stakes higher than I wanted to admit. Every instinct screamed that she was close, plotting, watching, waiting for me to slip. I gave him a curt nod. "Noted, but don't think I'm going to play by your rules completely. I have my own." "That's the way I like it," he said, standing now, towering over me just enough to remind me that control was always shifting. "Meet Evelyn. Learn what you can. And remember, tonight is only the beginning." I watched him disappear into the crowd, his figure swallowed by the neon-lit night. And for the first time, I understood that danger wasn't just something out there, hidden in the shadows. Danger was now part of my life. Proofread this. As I walked back toward my apartment, every shadow felt like a threat, every passerby a potential spy. My mind ran scenarios, escape routes, possibilities, and consequences. Midnight with Evelyn Hart would come faster than I liked, and I had to be ready. But deep down, a more complicated thought gnawed at me. Lucas Kane wasn't just a helper. He was part of the story now, part of the danger, part of the chaos I was about to dive headfirst into. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I was powerless to resist the pull he exerted over me. Tonight, the game had begun. And whether I survived it or not, nothing would ever feel ordinary again. As I prepared for my meeting with Evelyn Hart, a sudden, chilling realization hit me. Serena Voss was already steps ahead, watching, waiting, and she knew exactly where I would be. The contact: I arrived at 47 Wren Street a little before midnight, the city's neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement like shards of glass. The building looked ordinary from the outside, brick, slightly weathered, with a faint smell of damp and exhaust lingering in the air. But my instincts, honed from years of chasing stories that wanted to stay buried, told me that this ordinary facade was deliberate. Evelyn Hart didn't want to be noticed, and if she was anything like Lucas said, she was meticulous about her privacy. I paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath. The envelope of anxiety, curiosity, and adrenaline wrapped tightly around me. Lucas's words echoed in my mind. Stay alert. Notice the details. That's how you survive. That's how you win. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking softly. The smell of old wood and paper hit me first, followed by a faint hum of electricity somewhere in the building. I stepped inside cautiously, my eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. There were no signs of life, just the faint glow of a light at the far end of the corridor. "Ms. Sinclair?" A voice, calm but deliberate, called from the shadows. I froze, my hand instinctively tightening around the strap of my bag. "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Ava Sinclair." A figure emerged. She was older than I expected, maybe in her early 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her hair was silver at the temples, neatly pulled back, and she moved with a grace that suggested both age and experience. She studied me for a moment, her gaze assessing, almost as if she were weighing my intentions. "I'm Evelyn Hart," she said finally, her voice steady but edged with caution. "You're braver than most to come here alone at this hour." I forced a small smile, masking the nervousness coiling in my stomach. Curiosity and career make for poor judgment sometimes. She nodded, as if she understood completely. "Indeed, and sometimes, poor judgment is exactly what's needed to uncover the truth." We moved into a small parlor she clearly used as her workspace. Bookshelves lined the walls, stacked with folders, binders, and journals that spoke of years spent gathering information, connections, and secrets. The room smelled faintly of tea and aged paper, comforting in an odd way. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a worn leather chair opposite her. "I'll answer your questions as best I can. But first," she paused, studying me intently. "You need to understand the stakes." I sat, trying to mask my eagerness with a professional composure. "I do." Evelyn leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "You've been chasing a story that's bigger than any headline. This isn't just corruption or greed. This goes deeper. Much deeper. Powerful people, people who think they're untouchable, are involved. And they will not hesitate to silence anyone who threatens them." Her words hit harder than I expected. My career had taught me that danger wasn't always immediate, but the certainty in her tone made it feel like a punch to the chest. "Do you have proof?" I asked cautiously, aware that asking too many questions could be dangerous in itself. She nodded, pulling out a thin folder from a locked drawer. "I've been collecting evidence for years. Documents, photos, recordings. Enough to bring down at least one major player in the network. But it's fragmented. Pieces of a puzzle scattered across the city, across different hands." I leaned in, my pulse quickening. "And you want me to put the pieces together?" Evelyn's eyes gleamed, sharp and intense. "I want you to survive it long enough to see the truth revealed. You have skills that others lack. You notice, you ask, you dig. That's why Lucas sent you here." The mention of his name made me pause. Lucas had warned me about being careful, about trusting selectively. Evelyn clearly trusted him, but did I trust him enough to trust her? I didn't have time to debate it. The truth, whatever it was, demanded action. "What's the first piece?" I asked. She handed me a USB drive. "Everything here is digital, encrypted, and scattered across multiple locations. Start with this. It's a list of names and accounts connected to the main players. Each leads to something bigger. But be warned, some of these people are not who they appear to be." I took the drive carefully, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. This wasn't just another story, it was a web of deceit, manipulation, and danger, and I was smack in the middle of it. "Do you know who's already watching me?" I asked quietly. Evelyn hesitated. "Not all of them, but I know Serena Voss is involved. She's clever, resourceful, and obsessed with keeping this hidden. She's already manipulating events in ways you haven't even realized yet." The name cut through me like a cold blade. Serena. Lucas had warned me. Evelyn confirmed it. I realized with a sinking feeling that I was surrounded by people who would lie, cheat, and hurt to keep their secrets safe. And I had to navigate this without falling into a trap. How do I protect myself? I asked, though I knew the answer would be complicated. Awareness, Evelyn said simply. Observe, question, don't trust appearances. The smallest detail could be the difference between surviving and not surviving. And don't go alone. Even someone like Lucas Kane can only do so much. I frowned. Lucas had already hinted at dangers I couldn't fully comprehend yet. But Evelyn made it clear that he wasn't the solution, just a guide. The responsibility ultimately rested with me. I glanced at the clock. Midnight was approaching fast. Every second felt amplified, tense, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Why me? I asked again, more softly this time. Why risk all of this by involving me? Evelyn's gaze softened slightly, a hint of empathy breaking through her hardened exterior. Because you have the instincts, the courage, and the intelligence to navigate this. Others would be crushed under the weight. You might survive it. And survival is the first step toward victory. Her words settled over me, both a comfort and a warning. I had spent my life running toward the truth, even when it hurt. But this was a different scale entirely. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was a game of power, and the rules were deadly. I swallowed, nodding. I understand. I'll start with the USB. Evelyn's expression softened into something almost approving. Good, but remember, Serena isn't the only threat. There are eyes everywhere. Watch the shadows, trust your instincts, and remember Lucas Kane isn't completely what he seems. The weight of her warning hit me hard. Lucas was an ally, yes, but secrets, hidden agendas, and lies were part of this world. I had to be ready for anything. I left the building with the USB in my coat pocket, the chill of the night pressing against me. Every alleyway, every passing figure felt like a potential threat. The city hadn't changed, but I had. I wasn't just chasing a story anymore. I was chasing survival, truth, and the chance to finally see the web of deceit unravel. And as I walked, I felt it again, a presence, subtle but unmistakable. Someone was following me. I didn't need to see her to know. Serena Voss had already arrived in the game, and she was closer than I realized. Tonight, the first piece of the puzzle was in my hands. But the bigger picture, the danger, the betrayals, the truths hidden in shadows, was only beginning to unfold. As I returned to my apartment, the city's neon lights reflecting off the wet streets, I realized Serena Voss wasn't just following me. She was orchestrating events I hadn't even begun to understand. And the next move she made would put me directly in her crosshairs. Shadows in motion. The city didn't sleep, and neither did my thoughts. The moment I returned to my apartment, the USB drive burned a hole in my coat pocket. I paced, trying to shake off the tension that Evelyn Hart's warnings had draped over me. Serena Voss was already moving, orchestrating some unseen plan, and I had a sinking feeling she was closer than I wanted to admit. I set the drive on my desk and booted up my laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating the anxious lines of my face. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as if hesitating to open Pandora's box. But curiosity, that dangerous, relentless friend, always won. Plugging in the USB, I found encrypted folders, each labeled with dates, names, and cryptic codes. I opened the first one, a list of accounts, bank transfers, and what appeared to be detailed logs of meetings. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just corruption, this was meticulous planning, and someone had tracked these connections for years. I couldn't help but think about Lucas Kane. He had said I had skills others lacked, that I could notice details others dismissed. Now, staring at the labyrinthine network before me, I realized he was right. This was going to take all of my instincts, patience, and intelligence to piece together. Hours passed as I sifted through the files, taking notes, cross-referencing names, and marking connections. My mind raced, but my hands remained steady. I couldn't afford mistakes, not when the stakes were this high. The clock ticked closer to 3 a.m. and fatigue gnawed at the edges of my focus, but I pushed through. Then a message pinged on my phone. No name, no number. Just a simple text. You're being watched. Stop digging or you'll regret it. I froze. The shadows outside my window felt heavier, darker. My instincts screamed that this wasn't a bluff. Serena's signature. I could feel it in the calculated timing, the threat that felt personal rather than random. I pulled on my coat and stepped out into the cool night, heart hammering. I needed to know if she was really there or if I was letting paranoia take over. The city streets were wet from a late drizzle, the neon reflections fractured in puddles like broken glass. Every pedestrian, every car, felt like a potential threat. I kept to the shadows, weaving between alleys and side streets, observing everything and everyone. A figure caught my eye, blonde hair, sharp features, posture deliberate. My stomach twisted. Serena. I knew it instantly, even without the full view of her face. She moved like she owned the space, her presence impossible to ignore. I ducked behind a parked car, holding my breath as she scanned the street. Her eyes were sharp, calculating. She didn't move toward me, but her gaze lingered too long, and I felt the danger in the air thicken. She knew I had the drive. She knew I had started digging. And she was already planning her next move. I stayed hidden until she walked past, adrenaline surging through me. My pulse slowed only slightly when I was certain she had moved on. But I knew better than to believe I was safe. Serena didn't make mistakes. She waited, she calculated, and she struck at the perfect moment. Returning to my apartment, I slammed the door quietly, double-checked the locks, and sat back at my desk. My hands shook slightly as I opened the USB drive again, determined not to let fear paralyze me. Evelyn had said awareness was key, and I was painfully aware of just how vulnerable I was. I noticed a pattern in the files, certain names repeated, locations aligned, timestamps consistent. It was a network, yes, but it also suggested surveillance, manipulation, and control. Someone or multiple someones had been orchestrating events for years, and they were still at it. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Not everyone around you is an ally. Watch carefully. I clenched my fists. Lucas had warned me about trust. Evelyn had warned me about Serena. Now, the anonymous threats confirmed that my world had become a dangerous web, and one wrong step could unravel everything. I decided I needed backup, someone I could rely on without doubt. Jamie Tors. I dialed quickly, my fingers trembling slightly. Jamie, I said as soon as she picked up, trying to keep my voice steady. I need you. Something big is happening, and I can't handle this alone. Her familiar warmth, even over the phone, was a relief. Ava, slow down. What's going on? I explained briefly, careful not to disclose sensitive details over the line, but enough to get her to understand the urgency. She agreed immediately to come over. Having her, there was a small comfort, but I knew it wouldn't shield me from the larger forces at play. Serena was patient, meticulous, and unpredictable. Hours later, Jamie arrived, a comforting presence amid the tension. She scanned my workspace, her eyes widening slightly at the organized chaos of files and notes scattered across my desk. Wow, she muttered. You've been busy. You have no idea, I replied. But it's bigger than I imagined. And Serena Voss, she's already on me. Watching, waiting, I saw her tonight. Jamie's brow furrowed. Serena Voss, that's not just anyone. No, I said. She's dangerous and she's smart. She knows exactly what she's doing. We spent hours cross-referencing names, mapping connections, and planning the next steps. I explained the key points Evelyn had given me, the locations tied to the people in the network, and the patterns I had already noticed. Jamie offered insight, spotting links I hadn't considered. Her presence grounded me, kept me from spiraling into the fear and paranoia that threatened to take over. Still, the tension never fully lifted. Every shadow outside the window, every distant siren, reminded me that Serena was out there, watching, waiting. Proofread this? When Jamie finally left, I locked the door, double-checked the windows, and sat in silence. The city hummed around me, alive and oblivious. I opened the USB drive again, determined to continue, but my mind kept drifting back to Serena's presence, to the calculated way she had made herself known without ever directly confronting me. I realized then, with a cold clarity, that this wasn't just a story anymore. This was a game, and Serena Voss was already playing, using shadows and whispers to unsettle me, to keep me on edge. I leaned back in my chair, hands trembling slightly as I stared at the files. Each name, each transaction, each coded note felt like a thread in a dangerous tapestry, and I had to unravel it carefully or risk being caught in the web myself. I closed my eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. Not now. I had the tools, I had Jamie, I had Lucas's guidance, and I had Evelyn's information. That was enough to start. But the truth I was chasing had teeth, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. I could feel Serena's influence creeping into every corner of my life, and I realized with a shiver that tonight had been only the first brush with her reach. I opened the next folder on the USB drive and began reading, determined to stay ahead. But somewhere in the depths of the city, in the shadows she controlled, Serena Voss was already making her next move. As I traced the connections on the USB, I realized that one of the names linked directly to someone I trusted, and that person's betrayal could strike before I even had a chance to react. Serena Voss was no longer just a threat. She was about to pull the first strings of a trap I couldn't yet see. The first betrayal. The day had started like any other, though in this world, ordinary had a very flexible definition. I sat at my desk, laptop open, coffee cooling beside me, and the USB drive resting like a ticking bomb in front of me. The files Evelyn Hart had provided were revealing patterns, connections, and secrets that could topple people powerful enough to make careers or lives disappear. And yet, the more I dug, the more I felt the weight of every choice I made. I should have expected it. I should have known that in a web this intricate, the first blow would come from someone I trusted. Jamie had arrived earlier that morning, her energy a stabilizing force. Together, we had gone over names, dates, and bank transfers, noting patterns and anomalies. But even with her support, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was already 2 steps ahead, orchestrating chaos without my knowledge. It hit when I picked up my phone. A message appeared from an unknown number, innocuous at first glance. "Meet me, 3 p.m. downtown, pier by the old warehouse." My stomach dropped. I knew instantly who it was, Serena Voss. I didn't need proof, instinct told me. The timing, the anonymity, the deliberate simplicity, it screamed her. Jamie noticed the shift in my expression. "Ava, what is it?" I hesitated, debating how much to reveal. "It's a trap," I admitted finally. "I know Serena's behind it, but she wants me to come." Jamie frowned, hands on her hips. "You're not going alone, right?" I shook my head. "No, but I can't just ignore this. If she's baiting me, I need to know what she knows, and how far she's willing to go." We planned it carefully. Jamie would follow at a discreet distance, ready to intervene if things went south. My phone was fully charged, GPS on, and I had memorized the route to every exit and alleyway nearby. Still, the anticipation made my pulse spike. Serena was a master at manipulation, a master at turning even allies into liabilities. By the time I reached the pier, the sun had started to dip, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The air smelled of salt and rust, the faint tang of the river mixing with the decay of the old warehouse district. My footsteps echoed on the wooden planks, sharp and solitary. A figure emerged from the shadows, blonde hair, sharp features, confident stance. Serena Voss. She didn't smile, but her eyes glinted with that cold, calculating light I had come to recognize. "You came," she said, voice smooth, deliberate. I forced calm into my posture. "I always do. Why am I here, Serena?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me as if I were a puzzle she hadn't fully solved. "To warn you," she said, "and to test your loyalty." My stomach tightened. "Loyalty to whom?" "To the wrong people," she replied cryptically. "You're tangled in threads you don't fully understand, and some of the people you trust are more dangerous than you realize." I bristled. The words hit too close to home. I had already suspected someone close might be compromised, but hearing it from her, with that edge of certainty, was chilling. Before I could respond, she stepped aside, and I noticed movement behind her. 2 men, tall, imposing, lurking just out of the immediate light. They were clearly waiting, ready for her command. "You see," Serena said, almost theatrically. Danger isn't always in the shadows. Sometimes it's in the light where you least expect it. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. You're trying to scare me. No, she said, shaking her head. I'm preparing you. My instincts screamed that this wasn't just a warning. It was the first strike. I needed to think fast. I glanced around, noting potential exits, places to hide, and the path Jamie would take to reach me if necessary. Serena's game was unfolding in real time, and I had to keep a step ahead. Who sent you? I asked finally, voice low but deliberate. Who's behind this? She smiled faintly, coldly. The answers you seek are closer than you think. And the first betrayal comes from someone you've trusted all along. My heart skipped. Betrayal. Someone I trusted. My mind raced. Lucas, Jamie, Evelyn. I tried to read her expression, but she revealed nothing. That was her power. She controlled the narrative, every pause, every hint meticulously calculated. I backed toward the edge of the pier, feeling the planks creak beneath my weight. Serena didn't advance, but her presence was oppressive, inescapable. You're cautious, I'll give you that, she continued. But caution won't save you when the people around you aren't who they seem. Remember, shadows are everywhere. Then she turned and disappeared into the alleyway leading from the pier, leaving me alone with the men watching silently. My heart pounded and I reached for my phone, ready to call Jamie. But the screen lit up with another message before I could. From Lucas Kane, Ava, trust no one tonight. Serena's move is only the beginning. Check your contacts carefully. I'll explain soon. I exhaled, shaking. Lucas had confirmed my fear without revealing specifics. Betrayal was coming. And whoever it was, they were already playing their part perfectly. I made my way back, careful, calculated. Every shadow felt heavier, every step measured. My mind was spinning through possibilities, tracing every interaction, every conversation with the people I trusted. I realized with a cold certainty that nothing or no one was as it seemed. When I reached my apartment, Jamie was already waiting, eyes sharp. What happened? I dropped onto the couch, exhausted, adrenaline still coursing. She's moved. Serena, she's testing me. And someone I trust is compromised. I don't know who yet. Jamie's face tightened. We need a plan. This isn't just about the files anymore, it's about survival. I nodded, feeling the weight of the truth settle in my chest. Betrayal wasn't just a concept anymore. It was real, imminent, and it could strike at any moment. And I knew, instinctively, that the next move would be the one that determined everything. I opened the USB drive again, scanning the files with renewed intensity. Patterns, transactions, and names swirled before my eyes, and I tried to pinpoint where the first betrayal would hit. My pulse quickened. Serena was patient, but the people she manipulated weren't necessarily cautious. One slip, one overlooked detail, and the entire network could collapse, or worse, someone I trusted could be destroyed. Hours passed. The city outside my window buzzed with life, oblivious to the tension inside my apartment. I cross-referenced names, highlighted potential threats, and mapped out safe routes. Jamie helped, her presence both comforting and grounding. But even with her by my side, I knew I couldn't avoid what was coming. The first betrayal was inevitable. Someone close to me, someone I relied on, would turn. And when that happened, the game would change completely. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Lucas's message, Serena's warnings, and Evelyn's files. Every ally, every connection, suddenly felt fragile, uncertain. And I knew, deep down, that when the betrayal struck, I'd have to rely on nothing but my instincts, and hope they were enough to survive. As I traced the connections on the USB drive late into the night, a single email appeared on my screen, sent from someone I trusted the most. Its contents were innocuous, but the implications were devastating. The first true betrayal had begun, and the person behind it was closer than I could have imagined. The betrayer revealed. The moment I saw the email on my screen, my stomach sank. It was brief, innocuous on the surface, but something about the phrasing, the timing, and the subtle undertones made my instincts scream. Someone I trusted had crossed a line, and now the first real betrayal was no longer a threat in theory. It was happening. I stared at the sender's name, Jamie. My heart skipped, the disbelief clawing at me. I had relied on her, confided in her, and yet here it was. The message itself seemed harmless. Check the files from last night, something's off. Nothing overt, nothing that screamed malicious intent. But the way it was worded, the subtle nudge, the way she knew what I had been working on, My gut told me she wasn't acting entirely on her own. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady my racing thoughts. Could it really be Jamie? I searched my memory, replaying every interaction, every late-night phone call, every time she had suggested cross-checking something. Each instance now felt like it had a hidden layer I hadn't noticed before. Lucas's warning came back to me, sharp and clear. Trust no one tonight. Serena's move is only the beginning. I had assumed he meant Serena's manipulations externally, that she was the primary threat. But now it made sense in a way I hadn't anticipated. Serena didn't need to act alone. She could plant seeds, manipulate allies, and set traps through people I already trusted. I forced myself to take a deep breath. Panic wouldn't help. I needed evidence, clarity, and control. I opened the email carefully, checking the headers and metadata. It didn't reveal much on its own, but the links embedded within the message pointed me to a specific file, one that I hadn't noticed on the USB before. It was a minor detail at first glance, a folder labeled Operations Log Pending. The timestamps inside revealed edits made while I slept. My pulse quickened. Someone had been tampering with the files, accessing, altering, manipulating. And Jamie's email had led me directly to it. I felt the cold edge of betrayal tighten around my chest. But I didn't act impulsively. I knew Jamie well enough to understand that confronting her without proof would only make her defensive, or worse, push her further into the trap Serena had likely set. Instead, I started tracing digital footprints, backtracking through timestamps, IP addresses, and editing logs. My fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard, adrenaline sharpening my focus. It was meticulous, tedious work, but necessary. And slowly, piece by piece, the picture emerged. The edits had originated from a network that traced back to a device registered in Jamie's name. Not her personal phone, but a tablet she had borrowed the night we were mapping connections. She hadn't intended to be malicious, not entirely. But the data she had accessed had been compromised, altered subtly by Serena, enough to mislead, to manipulate, to create distrust. I exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and frustration washing over me. Jamie wasn't the traitor I had feared, but she had been an unknowing pawn, manipulated by Serena's foresight. My trust in her remained intact, but the realization stung. The first betrayal wasn't personal in intent, it was calculated, external, and it had nearly shattered the foundation of my team. I picked up my phone and dialed her immediately. "Jamie, we need to talk, now." She answered on the second ring. "Ava, is everything okay? Sit down somewhere safe. I've traced something in the files, it's important." Minutes later, she arrived at my apartment, eyes sharp and concerned. I led her to the living room, gesturing toward the laptop. "Look at this," I said, pulling up the logs, timestamps, and access history. "These edits, these changes, they didn't come from you, but they came from a device you used." Her brow furrowed. "What? That's impossible. I only accessed the files to help cross-check the connections." "I didn't." "I know," I said quickly, holding up a hand. "You didn't intend anything, but someone manipulated the access. Someone smart. Someone who knew exactly how to make it look like a betrayal." Jamie's face paled slightly. "Serena." I nodded. "Exactly. She's orchestrating this. She's testing us, destabilizing trust before the real move. We can't let her do that. Not now, not ever." We spent hours reconstructing the timeline, tracing edits, and identifying the subtle manipulations Serena had employed. Every folder, every note, every seemingly minor file had been altered to create confusion and fear. And the genius or cruelty of it was that it almost worked. Almost made me doubt the people I trusted most. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. "This isn't just a game," I murmured. "This is war. And we've already been caught in her first move." Jamie nodded, resolute. "Then we fight smarter, we anticipate her next steps, we don't react blindly." I looked at her, grateful for her presence. Even when manipulated, even when nearly turned against me, her loyalty was real. I realized that this was the first test of our partnership, and we had passed, but barely. Serena's reach was longer than I had imagined, and her strategies more insidious. I opened the USB drive again, determined to isolate the files Serena hadn't touched. It was painstaking work, but necessary. I highlighted connections, documented anomalies, and made a list of individuals who might be unwitting pawns like Jamie had almost become. proofread this, and then my phone buzzed. A new message. No name, no number, just a single line. Next move, closer than you think. My pulse spiked. Someone had been watching, tracking, waiting for the moment of confusion to strike. Serena wasn't done. She never was. And I realized, with a chill that traveled down my spine, that her next move wouldn't just be manipulation, it would be direct. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the city lights flickering through my window. Trust had been tested, betrayal had been narrowly avoided, but the game was far from over. The people I relied on were pawns in a larger scheme, and Serena's control was stronger than I had anticipated. I exhaled, steadying myself. This was only the beginning. Every ally, every connection, every decision mattered now more than ever. One misstep, one overlooked detail, and the entire network could collapse, or worse, someone I trusted could be destroyed. Jamie sat beside me, resolute, scanning the files with renewed determination. "We can do this," she said quietly. "We just have to stay ahead, anticipate, and not let her manipulate us again." I nodded, grateful for her steadfastness. "We will, but we need to be ready for anything. Serena's next move is coming, and it's going to be ruthless." I turned back to the USB drive, tracing the lines, connecting dots, and preparing for the inevitable confrontation. This was no longer just a story. It was survival, strategy, and uncovering truths buried under layers of deception. And Serena Voss was already 3 steps ahead, waiting for the moment to strike again. As night deepened, a subtle movement in the shadows outside my apartment window caught my attention. A familiar silhouette, Serena Voss, watched silently, her eyes glinting with calculated intent. The next betrayal wasn't just a test anymore, it was about to become personal. The personal strike. The city felt different that night, like the air itself was heavier, charged with electricity that crawled across my skin. Every shadow seemed to move with intent, every distant car, horn, or siren a warning. Serena Voss wasn't just watching anymore, she was acting. And this time, I could feel it was personal. I had been pacing my apartment for hours, trying to piece together the manipulations from the USB and the subtle misdirection Serena had planted with Jamie. But tonight was different. My instincts screamed that the next move wouldn't be digital. It wouldn't be hidden in folders or encrypted files. It would be real, tangible, and aimed directly at me. I checked the locks on the doors, windows, and even the balcony, yet the gnawing sense of intrusion didn't leave. Every creak in the building, every whisper of wind against the glass, set my nerves on edge. I couldn't afford to be careless. Serena had already demonstrated that she could manipulate the people closest to me, plant doubt, and nearly turn allies into enemies. My phone buzzed. A new message, no sender. Just a line of text that made my blood run cold. "Meet me at the corner of 5th and Pine. Alone, or the next surprise will be yours." I felt my pulse spike. The phrasing, the timing, the deliberate lack of identification, it had Serena written all over it. She wasn't just challenging me now, she was daring me. For the first time, it wasn't about the files. It was about control, fear, and intimidation. I debated my options. Call Lucas, call Jamie. Neither would likely prevent what Serena had planned. This was a test. A strike designed to force me out into the open, vulnerable, and reactive. I grabbed my coat, a small notebook, and my phone. No weapons, this wasn't about brute force. It was about wits, awareness, and control. If Serena wanted a confrontation, I'd meet it on my terms, or at least try. The streets were quiet as I moved through the city, damp with a recent drizzle that reflected the neon glow of shop signs like fractured mirrors. Each step echoed off the buildings, a rhythm that matched the pounding of my heart. I stayed in the shadows, careful to observe every passerby, every flicker of movement. When I reached 5th and Pine, the street was nearly empty. A lone figure leaned against a lamppost, just on the edge of the light. Blonde hair, poised stance, eyes scanning. "Serena." "Of course you came," she said, her voice smooth but with an edge of amusement. I didn't flinch. "You wanted me. Here I am." Her lips curved in the faintest smirk. "Clever, calm, observant, just like Lucas said, but cleverness alone won't keep you safe tonight." I stepped forward carefully, keeping my distance. "What's this about Serena? Why involve me directly?" She tilted her head, assessing. "Because you need to understand what's at stake. Not just the files, not just the network, but you. Everyone around you is fragile, easily manipulated. And tonight, I want to see how you handle pressure, how you react when the stakes are personal. Her words cut through me. Personal, that was new. Threats had been digital, indirect, calculated from a distance. Now she was here in my environment, daring me to respond, testing my instincts in real time. I won't play your games, I said, voice steady despite the churn of adrenaline. Oh, you will, she replied softly, almost a whisper, yet carrying an undeniable authority. Because whether you like it or not, you're already part of my game. The question is, how far are you willing to go to stay in control? My instincts screamed at me to react, but I held back. I had to think, observe, and anticipate. Serena wasn't reckless. Every word, every step, every glance had intent. She wanted me to panic, to make a misstep. I glanced around. The street was mostly empty, but the alleyways offered concealment. My phone vibrated, another anonymous message. Eyes on you, choose carefully. Serena's smile widened like she knew I had received it. See, even now you're not alone. But the question is, are they friends or pawns? My mind raced. Jamie, Lucas, Evelyn. Every ally suddenly seemed vulnerable to her manipulation. The trap was wider than I had thought, and in that instant I understood. Serena's goal wasn't just to intimidate, it was to isolate me, to make me question every connection, every decision, every step. I forced myself to breathe. What do you want from me? I asked calmly, masking the fear that prickled my nerves. Awareness, she said simply. Control, and a little fear. You've seen the first betrayal. You've noticed the manipulation. But now it's time to test your resilience when it's direct. When the threat is in your face, not just on a screen. A gust of wind blew down the street, carrying the faint smell of rain and the distant river. Serena's eyes glinted, calculating my response. And I realized the personal strike wasn't about me physically. It was about mental dominance, about pushing me to doubt my perceptions, my judgment, my trust. I took a slow step backward, keeping my focus. I'm not afraid of you, I said. She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. No, we'll see. Fear isn't always immediate. Sometimes it creeps in, subtle, relentless, until you can't tell friend from foe. Until every choice feels like a misstep. I stayed silent, scanning the street. My gaze lingered on the shadows, every movement, every glimmer of light. Serena knew I was alert. She wanted me to react. But I had learned from Evelyn, from Lucas, from the near betrayal with Jamie. Observation, patience, and foresight, those were my weapons. The street remained empty aside from us, the city's usual noise muted under the tension of this confrontation. Serena stepped closer, deliberately, her presence pressing without touching. I maintained distance, my mind racing through every contingency, every escape route, every possibility. Then she spoke, almost casually. The first true strike has been planned, and it's coming soon. Consider this your rehearsal. With that, she turned and disappeared into the night, melting into the shadows with the grace and precision I had come to expect from her. My heart pounded, adrenaline spiking. She had appeared, delivered her warning, tested my awareness, and vanished without a trace. I exhaled slowly, forcing my hands to stop shaking. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Serena Voss had made it personal, and I understood now. Her next move wouldn't be subtle. It would be direct, deliberate, and aimed at the core of everything I trusted. I returned to my apartment, every step deliberate, my senses on high alert. The city outside seemed oblivious to the tension, but I knew the game had escalated. Serena's influence had gone from shadow to immediate threat, and I realized with a chill that no one, not Lucas, not Evelyn, not Jamie, could fully shield me from what was coming. I sat at my desk, USB drive open, notes spread across the surface, trying to map the next steps, anticipate her moves. Fear lingered, but so did determination. This confrontation was only the beginning, and I had no intention of letting Serena win. Late that night, as I traced connections in the files, my phone vibrated with a message that froze me in place. A photo of someone I cared about, restrained and helpless, with a single line from Serena. Now it becomes personal. The personal strike unfolds. I woke with a start, my phone vibrating against the nightstand. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow across my bedroom, and I froze the moment I saw the sender. No name, no number, just a single image. It was Jamie. Bound, gagged, sitting on a chair in an unfamiliar, dimly lit room. Panic clawed at me, threatening to paralyze my thoughts, but I forced myself to breathe to focus. Serena's words from the previous night echoed in my mind. Now it becomes personal. I swallowed hard, heart hammering. I had anticipated manipulation, digital traps, even subtle misdirection. But this was different. This was a direct assault on someone I trusted and cared about. Jamie wasn't just collateral, she was leverage. And Serena Voss knew exactly how to use it. I grabbed my coat, my phone, and the USB drive, my mind racing. Every file, every connection, every note I had meticulously mapped suddenly felt like a potential lifeline. Serena had forced my hand. I had to act and fast. I dialed Luca's immediately. His voice was steady, calm, grounding. "Ava," he said, reading the panic in my tone without needing me to explain. "Jamie," I whispered, my words tight with urgency. "She's taken her. She's using her against me." Lucas's tone hardened. "Stay calm, panic won't help. Serena's game is about fear. Predictable reactions, impulsive decisions, that's what she wants. Where is she holding Jamie?" I showed him the image. "I don't know the location, but she sent this. And she's giving me a choice, I know it. A test, a trap, I have to find her." "Think Ava," Lucas said firmly. "Trace everything you know. Any recent locations, patterns, connections. Serena's predictable in her planning. You need to anticipate, not chase blindly." I exhaled sharply, trying to steady my shaking hands. Lucas was right. The last thing I could do was rush in blindly. Serena had orchestrated everything so far with precision. One misstep could cost Jamie, or worse, both of us. I pulled up the USB drive and began scanning for patterns, timestamps, access logs, location markers. Anything that could point to where Serena might be holding Jamie. Every file, every notation I had carefully tracked over the past weeks became a potential clue. Hours passed as I cross-referenced locations, noting abandoned warehouses, rarely used shipping docks, and storage units. One name kept appearing across multiple files, each linked indirectly to operations Serena had manipulated. A particular warehouse district near the river, marked with timestamps coinciding with her previous movements, stood out. I made a decision. This was the most dangerous move I had ever taken, but hesitation wasn't an option. I had to go, and I had to be smart. I texted Jamie's last known location to Lucas, letting him track my movements, and pocketed my phone, keeping my eyes on the street as I moved out. The city felt oppressive that night, shadows stretching long across slick streets, puddles reflecting fractured neon lights. Every step was deliberate, every sound measured. Serena had trained me to anticipate manipulation, to stay aware, but fear was still a constant companion. As I approached the warehouse district, I slowed, scanning each building. One in particular stood out, a dilapidated brick structure, windows boarded, doors reinforced. My instincts screamed at me, this was it. I crouched behind a rusted dumpster, observing the entrance. Two figures moved inside, shadows crossing the windows. Serena, and someone I didn't immediately recognize. My pulse quickened. I had to be cautious. Any wrong move could trigger a trap. I slipped into the alley, moving silently, using the shadows as cover. My mind raced with possibilities. How had Serena orchestrated this so quickly? How had she known I would trace her pattern here? She was always 3 steps ahead, calculating, precise, relentless. I crept closer to the entrance, listening. Voices. Low, controlled. One unmistakable tone, Serena. The other, muffled but unmistakably Jamie, pleading quietly, restrained. Rage surged through me, but I forced it down. I had to think, plan, execute. Impulse would be deadly. I circled the perimeter, looking for alternative entrances. A side door, slightly ajar, revealed a staircase leading down. Perfect. No one could see me from the street, and I could approach undetected. Heart pounding, I descended, careful to step lightly. The scent of damp concrete and old machinery filled my nostrils. I moved slowly, each shadow a potential threat, each sound a warning. Serena had made this personal, yes, but she had also underestimated my resolve. I reached the basement level and froze. There, tied to a chair in the center of the room, was Jamie. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw me, a flicker of hope sparking. "SHH," I whispered, holding up a hand. "It's me, I'm getting you out." Serena stepped out of the shadows, her presence commanding, her eyes glinting with cold amusement. "Clever, she's proofread this?" I took a deep breath, recalling Lucas's words, Evelyn's guidance, and the lessons Jamie had taught me through trust and partnership. I had to act, but strategically, not recklessly. Every decision now would carry consequences. I inched closer to Jamie, moving behind crates for cover. My heart pounded in rhythm with my cautious steps. Serena's gaze followed me, sharp and calculating, but I refused to falter. I had come this far, endured every test, navigated every trap, and I wouldn't let her win tonight. As I reached Jamie, my fingers worked quickly to loosen the ropes. Her eyes met mine, silent communication passing between us. Trust, determination, and urgency. Serena's voice cut through the tension. Every step you take, every choice you make, I've anticipated. The personal strike is more than just fear. It's about control. And control, Ava, is something I always hold. I froze for a fraction of a second, enough to reassess, to anticipate, to plan the final move. My fingers moved faster, cutting through the ropes, freeing Jamie. Now, I hissed. We bolted toward the side door I had spotted earlier. Serena's footsteps echoed behind us, but I had prepared for this. The exit led to the alley, darkness and shadows giving us cover. My adrenaline surged, muscles burning with urgency. We ran, hearts pounding, each step taking us further from Serena's immediate reach, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Once we were safely hidden, breathing heavily in the dark alley, I glanced at Jamie. Her eyes were wide but alive with relief. "Are you okay?" I whispered. She nodded, voice shaking. "Thanks to you, yes." I nodded, but my mind was already racing. Serena had made it personal tonight, but she hadn't won. Not yet. And I knew, with chilling clarity, that the next move would escalate even further. As we made our way back to the safety of my apartment, a final anonymous message appeared on my phone. "You saved her for now. But the real game begins when your heart is the target." The heart of the game. The apartment felt smaller tonight, as though Serena's presence had seeped into the walls themselves. Even with Jamie safe beside me, the tension didn't ease. The thrill of rescue was fleeting. The reality was far more dangerous. Serena had made it personal, and that meant the next move would target more than just our bodies. It would target our minds, our hearts, our very instincts. Jamie sat quietly on the couch, still trembling from the ordeal. I wanted to reassure her, but my own nerves were taut, strung tight with anticipation. I poured us both coffee, my hands trembling despite my effort to seem calm. Lucas had promised to stay on call, monitoring patterns, analyzing the files, but even he couldn't predict everything Serena was capable of. My phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "You saved her, but at a cost. Choices have consequences, Ava. What are you willing to sacrifice?" I clenched my fists around the cup. Choices. Sacrifices. That was Serena's favorite game, forcing me to weigh impossible decisions, manipulating every move I made, ensuring that I second-guessed myself at every turn. Jamie looked up, her eyes wide. "Ava, what does she want?" I forced a tight smile, hiding my fear. "She wants to make us think, to force us to doubt ourselves, to make the next step feel impossible." But the truth was far more insidious. Serena wasn't just threatening. She was laying out the blueprint for manipulation, so intricate that any misstep could destroy not just me, but everyone I cared about. I thought about Evelyn's guidance, Lucas's warnings, the betrayal I had narrowly avoided with Jamie. Every lesson pointed to one truth. Serena was methodical, relentless, and brilliant. I opened the USB drive again, scanning files, cross-referencing locations, patterns, and anomalies. Every timestamp, every altered file, every subtle manipulation had led to this moment. Serena wasn't acting randomly. She was creating a labyrinth, and I was trapped inside it. Then a call came through on my phone. No caller ID. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, knowing that answering could either provide crucial information or trigger another trap. But the moment I pressed answer, a calm, familiar voice came through. "Ava." "Serena," I froze. My pulse spiked, but I forced my voice steady. "You're making a mistake contacting me directly." "Oh, Ava," she said, her tone dripping with amusement. "Mistake? No, this is the heart of the game. You think rescuing Jamie was the end? That was only a rehearsal, a minor victory. The real challenge is just beginning." I gritted my teeth. "What do you want?" "To see how far you'll go," she replied softly, almost a whisper. "To test not your intelligence, but your heart, your loyalty, your courage. Every choice from now on will carry consequences, and some will cost dearly. My mind raced. She wasn't bluffing. This wasn't about files anymore, or stolen information, or even physical threats. She was attacking the core of who I was, my judgment, my instincts, my moral compass. "Tell me," I said, voice firm, controlled. "What's your next move?" She laughed softly, the sound like ice on metal. "Predictable, you want clarity, you crave understanding, but clarity comes at a price. And tonight, the choice you make will reveal more than just strategy. It will reveal your soul." I felt a chill run down my spine. She wasn't just escalating. She was dictating terms, forcing me to act emotionally as well as rationally. Every ally I had, every relationship I valued, every decision I thought I understood, everything could be turned against me. I glanced at Jamie. Her eyes reflected trust, fear, and a quiet reliance on me. I couldn't let Serena exploit that. Not again, but I knew that any move I made now would carry risk. The balance between protection and strategy was razor-thin. Lucas's voice rang in my head. Predictable reactions are her favorite traps. Stay calm, stay observant, anticipate. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing thoughts. I had to think strategically. I had to anticipate Serena's moves. I had to protect Jamie, myself, and the network of connections we had worked so hard to uncover. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call, but a message, a video file. My hands trembled as I opened it. Jamie. Alive, yes, but in a different room this time. The camera panned slowly, showing an envelope on a table. A note visible inside. "Decide quickly. One choice will save her. The other will save the files. You cannot have both." My chest tightened. Both, Jamie and the files, the very backbone of everything Evelyn and Lucas had guided me to protect. Serena's game was no longer subtle. It was a calculated test, forcing me to weigh human life against information. I sank into the chair, my mind spinning. The moral dilemma was cruel, almost unbearable. Every instinct screamed to save Jamie, but the files contained evidence that could expose corruption, manipulation, and betrayal on a scale that could destroy countless lives. Every choice carried risk, every hesitation invited disaster. I thought about the first betrayal, the near manipulation with Jamie, the digital traps, the personal threat last night. Serena wasn't just targeting me, she was exploiting the pattern she had studied for weeks. She knew my priorities, my values, my instincts. And now she was testing them, forcing me to make a choice that could haunt me forever. I glanced at Jamie, her eyes wide, her trust in me unspoken but absolute. I couldn't falter. I couldn't let her become another pawn. I reviewed the USB files again, tracing the most critical information, identifying the data most likely to be destroyed if I made the wrong decision. Every line, every code, every encrypted folder became a potential casualty. Finally, I made my decision. I would save Jamie first. The moral choice, the human choice, the choice of the heart. I texted Lucas, detailing the files, their priority and possible contingencies. I needed backup. I needed options. But my focus was clear. Jamie's life came first. I grabbed my coat, phone, and notebook, heart pounding, adrenaline surging. Tonight, I would face Serena again. And this time, the stakes were no longer theoretical. They were intensely personal, moral, and immediate. The streets were quiet, ominously still. Every shadow felt like Serena watching, waiting, anticipating my next move. I had learned to trust my instincts, but tonight they were tested as never before. Every footstep, every turn, every decision could mean life or death. I reached the warehouse district, tracing the location as best I could from the video metadata. The rain had begun again, light drizzle making the ground slippery. My eyes scanned for movement, listening for sounds, anticipating traps. Serena had trained me to anticipate manipulation, but this time, the emotional stakes were higher. I paused outside the building, taking a deep breath. Every lesson, every ally, every strategy led to this point. I had to act decisively, without hesitation, without doubt. One wrong move would cost me dearly. And then, a shadow moved inside the doorway. I recognized it immediately. Serena. Watching, waiting. The next phase of the game had begun. As I stepped forward, heart pounding, Serena's voice cut through the darkness. "Tonight, Ava, you learn that the heart is the ultimate battlefield, and no one walks away unscathed." The first crack. The rain had soaked through my coat by the time I reached the warehouse. the metallic scent of wet concrete mixing with tension and fear. Every step I took was deliberate, every shadow a potential threat. Serena had orchestrated everything with precision, and I knew the personal strike was only the beginning. This was her test, my first real confrontation under fire, and I had to prove I could survive it. Jamie walked beside me, freed but still trembling. Her hand barely grazed mine, and I offered a tight smile to reassure her. She clung to me not out of fear of me, but fear of what Serena could do if I faltered. I couldn't let her down. The warehouse loomed ahead, windows darkened, doors reinforced, every inch of it silent but alive with threat. I crouched behind a stack of crates, surveying the entrances. Serena's plan was simple in its complexity. Force me into a direct confrontation, test my instincts, and manipulate my choices while my focus was split between rescue and strategy. Lucas's words echoed in my mind. Predictable reactions are her traps. Observe, anticipate, and control the game. I exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar edge of determination settle in. This was the first crack, the first moment where Serena had moved from digital manipulation to personal confrontation, and I intended to meet it head-on. We edged closer to the main entrance. Shadows shifted, subtle movements catching my eye, and I realized that Serena was expecting me. She thrived on control, and tonight I wouldn't give it to her. A faint click of a lock and the door creaked open. Serena stepped into the dim light, her posture poised, eyes glinting with amusement. "Welcome, Ava," she said, her voice smooth, almost velvety. "I see you've chosen wisely. Jamie first, heart over logic." I tightened my fists. "She's alive, Serena. I won't let you touch her." "Oh, I never intended to touch her physically," Serena replied, tilting her head. "The heart is more fragile than the body, more susceptible to mistakes. And you're already at a crossroads." I scanned the interior. Tables, crates, equipment, every item could hide a trap, a threat, a distraction. My mind raced, cataloging possibilities, calculating outcomes, weighing risk versus action. Serena had designed this environment to test me, to force me into emotional and strategic conflict simultaneously. Jamie's eyes met mine, and I gave her a subtle nod. She understood. Stay calm, trust instincts, anticipate. She had always been my anchor, my reminder that we weren't alone in this. Serena moved closer, circling slowly like a predator. "You're good, Ava. Clever, resourceful, cautious. But cleverness can only take you so far. Tonight, it's about heart, instinct, and sacrifice. Are you ready to see how far you'll crack?" I met her gaze. "I don't crack, I adapt, I survive." She smirked, bold, brave, foolish. "We'll see which of these traits saves you or loses everything." I noticed the subtle shifts in her stance, the positioning of crates and shadows. There were multiple exits, yes, but also controlled choke points. One wrong step, one hesitation, and Jamie could be at risk again. Serena's traps weren't just physical, they were psychological, designed to push me into panic. I edged forward, careful, calculating. "If you're so clever, Serena, tell me, what's your endgame?" "Endgame?" she said, almost laughing. "Endgame is you realizing that every choice has a consequence, that trust is fragile, and that the strongest minds can falter when their heart is involved. This is not just strategy. It's evolution, a test. And tonight, Ava, you are my experiment." My pulse spiked. She wasn't bluffing. Every step, every word, every calculated pause, Serena had designed this confrontation to push me to the edge. And I had to navigate it without losing sight of Jamie, without succumbing to fear, without making a fatal mistake. I circled cautiously, keeping my eyes on both Serena and Jamie. My mind raced, analyzing possibilities, anticipating her reactions. Every scenario, every contingency plan I had rehearsed mentally was put to the test. Then I saw it, a slight glimmer beneath a crate. A small camera, a microphone. Serena had eyes and ears everywhere. The realization sent a chill down my spine. Not only was this a physical confrontation, it was a performance. Every reaction I made was being observed, evaluated, and possibly exploited. I took a deep breath. "You want me to falter, to make a mistake, to crack, but I won't, not tonight." Serena's smile widened. "Ah, the first true crack. That moment when fear should be creeping in, but you resist. Interesting, admirable. But let's see how long you can maintain control when the next move arrives." She gestured subtly, and I realized the shadows shifted again. Another subtle device, a tripwire perhaps, or a hidden sensor. Serena's traps were layered, overlapping, and designed to create hesitation. Hesitation meant risk. Risk meant Jamie. I made my move. Swift, deliberate, calculated. I moved toward Jamie, keeping low, silent, aware. Serena's eyes followed me, measuring, anticipating, but I refused to give her satisfaction. My instincts guided my steps, every movement precise, every calculation intentional. As I reached Jamie, I crouched beside her. "Stay calm, we're getting out," I whispered. Her hand tightened around mine, and I felt the weight of responsibility, the heavy pull of stakes that had never felt higher. Serena stepped forward, breaking the tension. "You think you can escape this test? That's exactly what makes it interesting. But the crack is widening, Ava, and every crack has consequences." Proofread this, I met her gaze. I decide the consequences. The air was taut with anticipation, each heartbeat echoing in my ears. I knew this confrontation wasn't over. The first crack had appeared, the test had begun, but the battle was far from won. Serena was relentless, calculating, and always 3 steps ahead. And tonight, she had forced me to confront the reality of the game in its most personal, raw form. Jamie's eyes met mine again, and I understood. Her safety, our trust, our alliance, it was all intertwined with strategy and heart. Every decision I made tonight would carry weight, but this was the first crack. And I intended to widen it on my own terms, to meet Serena's challenge with precision, courage, and the determination to survive and protect those I cared about. As Serena retreated into the shadows, a new message appeared on my phone. "Congratulations, Ava. You survived the first crack. But the fractures you cannot see are the ones that will shatter you." Fractures deepen. The city felt like it had changed overnight. Or maybe it was just me. Ever since the first crack, since Serena had escalated from digital threats to personal strikes, the world seemed darker, heavier, more dangerous. Every step I took felt deliberate, calculated, like walking across a tightrope strung over an abyss. One wrong move, and everything could collapse. Jamie sat beside me in the apartment, wrapped in a blanket, trying to shake off the fear that still lingered in her eyes. I wanted to reassure her, wanted to make her feel safe, but the truth was we weren't safe. Not really. Serena's presence hung in the air like smoke, unseen but suffocating. Lucas had stayed on call through the night, his calm voice a tether to reason. "Ava," he said, "don't forget, the first crack was a warning. She's testing your decision-making under pressure. Expect the next phase to escalate." I nodded, gripping my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles turned white. I knew he was right. Every step so far had been a rehearsal. Every trap, every threat, every manipulation had led us here. And Serena had made it clear that the next fracture would target my heart, my strategy, and everything I valued. A message appeared on my phone. No number, no name, just a single line. "Fractures are easier to exploit than they appear. Tonight, you'll learn why." My chest tightened. The warning was both literal and figurative. I couldn't tell if it referred to the files, Jamie, or me, but the implication was clear. Serena was escalating. I looked at Jamie, her eyes trusting, vulnerable, dependent. I clenched my fists around the mug. Protecting her had become more than a choice, it was instinct, necessity. But instinct alone wouldn't be enough. Serena's game had grown more complex, more personal. She wasn't just testing me, she was trying to break me. I reviewed the USB files again, scanning for patterns, for anything that could give us an edge. Every timestamp, every hidden alteration, every trace of digital manipulation was a clue. Serena thrived on chaos, but I had to bring order, precision, and foresight. The phone buzzed again, a video file. I hesitated, then opened it. Jamie, tied again, though this time not physically restrained. Serena's message came through the screen, her voice calm but icy. "Observe closely, Ava. This is the fracture you didn't see coming. Your choice now will reveal what truly matters. And remember, every decision, every hesitation has consequences." The video panned slowly, showing Jamie in a room filled with boxes and crates, some marked with the USB files we had risked everything to protect. Serena had orchestrated a scenario where my two most important priorities, Jamie's safety and the files, were intertwined in a single moment of choice. My stomach churned. She was forcing me into a moral and strategic dilemma. Save one and risk the other, or attempt both and risk failure entirely. The stakes had never been higher. I exhaled slowly, forcing my racing thoughts into focus. Panic would only make Serena stronger. Observation, anticipation, and calculated risk were my weapons. I had to analyze, not react. I noticed something subtle in the video: the placement of crates, the shadows, the angles. Serena had been deliberate. There was a path, a sequence of actions that could give us both a chance. But it required precision, timing, and nerves of steel. I called Lucas immediately, explaining the situation. "We can attempt to retrieve both, but the margin for error is minimal," he said, his tone firm, unyielding. "You must stay focused, Ava. Serena thrives on fear, on hesitation. Move deliberately. Trust your instincts." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. My instincts were screaming, warning me, urging me to act. But strategy over instinct had kept us alive this far. Every move must be intentional, calculated, and precise. Jamie looked at me, her voice trembling. "Ava, what do we do?" I forced a calm tone. "We get them both. We follow the sequence. Stay with me, trust me. We can't fail." We moved quickly through the rain-soaked streets to the warehouse district. Shadows stretched across cracked sidewalks, puddles reflecting neon lights like fractured glass. Every step, every sound, every movement felt like it could trigger a trap. Serena had trained me to anticipate manipulation, but the stakes tonight were more personal, more urgent, more dangerous than ever before. I approached the warehouse, crouching behind crates and scanning entrances. The shadows were subtle but deliberate. Someone was observing, calculating, anticipating my moves. Serena's influence was everywhere. Inside, the room mirrored the video. Crates, boxes, and a carefully staged layout designed to test my observation, judgment, and emotional control. Jamie's position was clear, visible but at risk. The USB files were marked, strategically placed to force me into simultaneous decisions. I assessed the environment, identifying potential hazards, choke points, and paths of escape. Serena had designed every element to provoke hesitation, fear, and impulsive decisions. But I had trained for this. I had analyzed patterns, learned from past manipulations, and prepared for precisely this scenario. I crouched beside Jamie, whispering instructions. "Follow my lead. Move only when I tell you." Her nod was subtle but determined. She trusted me completely, and I couldn't fail her now. Step by step, I guided us through the room, avoiding traps, triggering mechanisms only when necessary, and keeping my eyes on every shadow, every corner, every subtle movement that could indicate Serena's interference. Halfway across the room, a faint click made me freeze. My instincts screamed danger. A crate shifted, revealing a hidden sensor, a tripwire, likely linked to alarms or more traps. I adjusted our path, navigating around it carefully. Serena's design was brilliant in its cruelty. Every misstep could force a reaction, compromise strategy, or threaten Jamie. We reached the first cluster of USB files. I grabbed what I could, careful not to disturb traps, while keeping one eye on Serena's potential movements. Jamie followed instructions flawlessly, moving silently beside me, trust and focus unwavering. "Almost there," I whispered, though my heart hammered. The tension was suffocating, the stakes more immediate than ever. And then I saw her, a shadow at the far end of the room. Serena, observing, calculating, smiling. She didn't need to act physically. The tension, the fear, the psychological pressure was already her weapon. I took a deep breath, centering myself, focusing on precision, timing, and observation. This was the fracture she had planned, and I refused to crack under it. As we neared the final set of files, a sudden movement froze me in place. Serena had shifted the stakes yet again, and this time, the trap was designed to force a decision that could change everything. The ultimate trap, The warehouse felt colder than ever. Not because of the rain dripping through broken skylights or the damp concrete beneath my boots, but because of Serena's presence. She didn't need to be visible to dominate the space. I could feel her calculations pressing against my every thought, every movement. Every crack in my resolve, every hesitation. It was all observed, measured, ready to be exploited. Jamie walked beside me, close enough to feel her warmth, yet I knew that proximity made her vulnerable. Protecting her had become instinct, but instinct alone wouldn't be enough tonight. Not with Serena orchestrating the ultimate trap. The files were within reach now, stacked neatly at the far end of the room, the culmination of every choice we had made so far. But the arrangement was deliberate, forcing me to split my attention between Jamie and the information that could unravel Serena's network once and for all. Every shadow, every subtle sound suggested another mechanism, another hidden danger. I crouched low, scanning the room carefully. Crates, boxes, and reinforced barrels formed a maze of deliberate obstacles. Serena's signature precision was evident. A misstep here, a slight distraction there, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Lucas's voice rang in my mind. Ava, trust instincts, not fear. Analyze every variable before committing. I nodded to myself, even though he couldn't see me. My instincts screamed, urging caution, but every second we delayed increased the stakes. Serena wasn't bluffing. This was the ultimate test of observation, strategy, and heart. Jamie whispered, "Ava, what do we do?" I forced a calm, steady tone. "We follow the path I mapped. One misstep, one hesitation could put us in her control. Stick with me, trust every move." Step by step, I navigated toward the files, scanning for subtle triggers. A faint glint beneath a crate caught my eye, a sensor, probably linked to alarms or something worse. I adjusted our path, guiding Jamie carefully. Every calculation, every choice carried risk. Then I saw it, a wire stretched across the floor, nearly invisible under the dim light. My pulse spiked, but I had anticipated this. Serena had layered traps to exploit fear, hesitation, and instinct. I carefully lifted my foot, stepped around the wire, and felt a rush of relief. Only a rush. We weren't safe yet. The USB files were just a few meters away. I could almost taste victory, but Serena's signature subtlety made me wary. Something didn't feel right. "Careful," I whispered to Jamie. "Something off." She nodded silently, eyes wide. I crouched, scanning every angle, every shadow, every potential trigger. That's when I noticed the subtle difference. The spacing of the crates, the reflection off a puddle of water on the floor. A mirrored surface, likely used to conceal a pressure sensor or camera. Serena's design wasn't just about trapping us physically. It was about psychological manipulation, forcing me to doubt every choice. I adjusted our trajectory, inching closer. My hands moved toward the USB files cautiously, aware that any sudden movement could trigger a device. The files themselves were deceptively simple, stacked neatly, almost inviting me to reach out. But the trap wasn't in the files, it was in me, my reaction, my decision-making under pressure. I glanced at Jamie. She trusted me completely. Her eyes conveyed fear, but also unwavering faith in my ability to protect her. That trust strengthened my resolve. I could not fail. I reached the files and began gathering them, careful to avoid contact with any hidden sensors. My movements were deliberate, precise, and deliberate again. Serena had created the ultimate trap, not to physically harm us, though she could, but to fracture our confidence, to force hesitation, to make every choice feel like a potential disaster. Just as I secured the last USB folder, the room shifted. A section of crates swung open silently, revealing Serena. She didn't need to rush or raise her voice. The placement alone was intimidation enough. "Impressive, Ava," she said, voice calm, almost soothing. "You've navigated everything so far perfectly. But the ultimate trap isn't physical, it's mental. And now, you face the choice that will define you." I froze. My heart hammered in my chest, adrenaline surging. The ultimate trap. Every warning, every subtle manipulation had led to this moment. She gestured toward a panel in the corner of the room. A single button, red, glowing faintly. Press it and Jamie is safe, but the files are destroyed. Ignore it and the files survive, but Jamie is at my mercy. Choose, Ava. Make it personal, make it strategic, make it final. My chest tightened. Every fiber of my being screamed to protect Jamie. but the files contained everything we had worked for, every piece of evidence to take Serena down. Save Jamie, and the network might survive her reach. Save the files and risk her immediate retaliation against the person I cared for most. I thought back to Lucas's advice, Evelyn's guidance, every past choice, every near miss, every moral dilemma I had faced. Serena had designed this as the culmination, the apex of her manipulation. And now the choice was mine, raw and unfiltered. Jamie looked at me, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. "Ava, whatever you choose, I trust you." The weight of responsibility pressed down. I had been trained, prepared, tested, but this was different. The ultimate trap wasn't about agility, observation, or strategy. It was about heart, courage, and the ability to act under unbearable pressure. I inhaled, steadying my shaking hands. The decision was clear, not because it was easy, but because some choices defined who you were. I pressed the button. A loud mechanical click echoed through the warehouse. Jamie's restrained fear dissolved into relief as the room shifted, confirming the safety of her position. But the files, our hard-won leverage, would be compromised. Serena smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of amusement. Brave, moral, predictable, but every choice carries consequences. Tonight, Ava, you've revealed yourself. I clenched my jaw. The immediate danger had passed, but I knew the cost of this choice would reverberate. Proofread this. Jamie tried to distract herself with light conversation as we walked home. "We'll figure it out, Ava," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "We always do." Her optimism was admirable, but it felt fragile. I wanted to reassure her, wanted to nod and promise that everything would be fine. But Serena had shown me that certainty didn't exist. Everything could be undone in an instant, and tonight's encounter was proof. Lucas called while we walked. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice firm yet gentle. I hesitated before answering. "We're okay for now." But Serena isn't done. She's escalating, testing more than just our skills. She's probing our trust, our instincts, even our sense of morality. "Exactly," Lucas said, his tone sharper. "Expect manipulation, misdirection, and emotional pressure. You survived the first cracks, but she's moving into the deep end now. Be ready for anything, Ava." I hung up, feeling the weight of anticipation. Serena's mind games had always been subtle, but now they were direct, personal, and relentless. Every choice I made had consequences, and the next set of challenges would push me to the limits of endurance, strategy, and heart. Back at the apartment, I began analyzing the files we had salvaged from the warehouse. Every line, every timestamp, every digital footprint was a clue. Serena hadn't just orchestrated traps, she had left breadcrumbs, patterns meant to force me into mental calculations, to keep me second-guessing every move. Jamie watched me quietly, sensing my tension. "Ava, are we being careful enough?" I forced a small smile. "We are, but the challenge isn't just about being careful. It's about anticipating her moves, understanding her patterns, and staying one step ahead. That's how we survive." I spread the files across the table, scanning through encrypted codes and altered logs. My mind moved quickly, piecing together Serena's methods, her manipulations, and the traps I hadn't yet seen. Every anomaly, every repeated pattern was a message, one meant to destabilize, to pressure, to provoke errors. Hours passed, the rain outside providing a rhythmic backdrop to our vigilance. Serena's influence was palpable, even in her absence. The more I studied the files, the more I realized how deeply she understood me, how carefully she had crafted every test to exploit not just my skills, but my heart, my morality, my instincts. And then my phone buzzed. Another message. No caller ID, no signature, just text. "You think you understand the game, Ava, but understanding is an illusion. The next fracture will be in your own mind. Trust no one completely, not even those closest to you." A chill ran down my spine. Serena wasn't threatening this time with direct danger. This was psychological warfare. She had moved beyond the tangible. She wanted to undermine trust, to create doubt where it didn't exist. I looked at Jamie. "Stay alert, okay? Things are going to get complicated." She nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. Her trust in me was absolute, but Serena's words had planted seeds of doubt. I had to protect her from that too. Not just her body, but her confidence, her sense of safety. I returned to the files, analyzing every irregularity, cross-referencing timestamps with known locations and communication logs. My mind raced, balancing strategy with caution. Serena's game wasn't just about physical traps anymore. It was about forcing me to question decisions, to doubt allies, to reconsider choices I thought I understood. I considered calling Lucas for assistance, but the message lingered in my mind: trust no one completely. Was this a trap to make me hesitate, to question his guidance? My instincts screamed yes, but hesitation could be fatal. I took a deep breath. I needed clarity. Logic first, instinct second. Serena thrived on chaos, and I couldn't give her that satisfaction. I mapped out contingencies for every possible scenario. If she manipulated Lucas, if she intercepted communication, if she forced me into a moral dilemma. Every calculation was an attempt to regain control in a situation where her influence seemed limitless. Hours blurred as we worked, analyzing, strategizing, predicting. Serena's shadow loomed over every decision, every calculation. She was everywhere, her traps unseen but meticulously designed, her manipulations subtle but pervasive. Finally, exhaustion overtook me briefly, and I leaned back in my chair. Jamie reached out, placing a hand on mine. "Ava, we'll get through this, together." Her words grounded me. Despite Serena's attempts to fracture trust, to isolate me, to create doubt, Jamie's faith reminded me of why I fought. We weren't alone. And while Serena could create cracks, we could navigate them together. But even as I allowed myself a moment of reassurance, the next step loomed, looming like a shadow on the horizon. Serena had escalated the psychological warfare, and I knew she wouldn't relent. The fractures in trust, in perception, in instinct, they would deepen, and the next challenge would push me harder than ever before. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. The quiet of the night was deceptive. Serena's influence was insidious, creeping into thoughts, testing resolve, probing weaknesses. We couldn't rest. Not really. Not yet. I closed the laptop carefully, securing the files. "We need to prepare," I said firmly. "The next challenge is coming, and it will be more than a physical test. It will be a battle for our minds." Jamie nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Her trust was unwavering, but I knew the seed of doubt Serena planted would linger, shaping decisions, reactions, and perception. I allowed myself a brief moment to breathe. Strategic pauses were necessary, but I couldn't let it slip into complacency. Serena's mind was always moving, always plotting, always anticipating the next fracture. And I had to be ready for it, mentally, physically, and emotionally. A sudden alert on my phone lit up the dark apartment. "The fractures you feel now are nothing. Tonight, you will be forced to betray your own instincts, and no one you trust will remain untested." The consequences unfold. The city had never felt so heavy. Every streetlight flickered like a warning, every shadow carried the weight of anticipation. Serena's message from last night echoed in my mind, repeating like a sinister mantra. "Tonight, you will be forced to betray your own instincts, and no one you trust will remain untested." Jamie sat beside me on the couch, her fingers entwined with mine, grounding me even as fear crawled up my spine. She had been steadfast through everything so far, but even her resolve was tested now. The events of the warehouse, the moral choice I'd made, and the constant psychological pressure Serena exerted were starting to take their toll. I glanced at the files we'd salvaged, scanning them again for any missed detail, any clue that might give us an edge. My mind raced, parsing patterns and inconsistencies, but the nagging sensation that something critical was slipping past me refused to leave. Serena's traps were never obvious. They were layered, subtle, designed to exploit the tiniest hesitation or doubt. Then the call came. No number, no name, just the distorted voice that had become all too familiar. "Ava," Serena's voice purred, calm and menacing, "you've been clever, strategic, determined. But cleverness can only carry you so far. Tonight, consequences unfold, and the cracks you've been mending will widen." I swallowed hard, my stomach twisting. "What have you done, Serena?" "Oh, Ava," she said, with that infuriatingly calm inflection. "I've set events into motion that cannot be reversed. People you care about, places you think are safe, nothing will remain untouched. You've had the luxury of strategy and caution, but now the real test begins. Act wisely, or the consequences will consume everything." I hung up, every nerve in my body taut. The threat was immediate, yet abstract, a perfect example of Serena's cruelty. She didn't need to attack directly. She had created a system where every choice I made would carry real-world consequences. I turned to Jamie. We have to move, now. There's no telling what she's set in motion. Her grip tightened. Where? How do we even know where she's acting? I shook my head. We don't, but we follow the trail, anticipate, and stay ahead. That's all we can do. We left the apartment quickly, keeping low, avoiding streets that seemed exposed. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of Serena analyzing our every movement. Each step through the city was calculated, every glance toward alleyways and building entrances scanned for anomalies. The first sign of her handiwork appeared as we turned a corner near the financial district. A car that wasn't there yesterday parked conspicuously, its windows tinted, engine idling. My heart clenched. Surveillance. She was already steps ahead. I pulled Jamie back into shadow. Stay calm, observe, don't react. The car door opened and a figure stepped out. Not Serena herself, but a courier, a signal. Inside the vehicle, we noticed a small package left deliberately visible. It was clearly a message. I stepped closer cautiously, retrieving it without touching any other surfaces. Inside was a single USB, a photograph, and a note in Serena's precise, cold handwriting. Ava, every choice has consequences. Open it and see the result of your last decision. My pulse spiked. I opened the USB on a portable device, the photograph loading immediately. Jamie's apartment, the files we had left there, in flames. Smoke curling into the night sky, windows blackened, everything we had worked to secure gone. I staggered back, disbelief and rage colliding. No, it can't be. Jamie grabbed my arm. Ava, we need to stay calm, we have to think. What now? I clenched my fists. Now we adapt, now we survive. Serena wants me reacting emotionally. That's the point. She's counting on us panicking, making mistakes, but I refuse. We ducked into a nearby alley, quickly assessing the situation. The fire was contained to the apartment, but the files, everything crucial, were gone. Serena had escalated from psychological pressure to real-world consequences. She had shown me that no safe space existed, that trust, strategy, and preparation could be rendered useless with a single move. I took a deep breath, forcing my mind into focus. Panic would only make us predictable, and Serena thrived on predictability. We had to anticipate her next steps, predict the consequences she had set in motion, and stay ahead. I pulled out the remaining USB files, the ones we had carried with us, and began cross-referencing every detail. Every timestamp, every altered log, every digital footprint that hinted at her manipulations. The goal now wasn't just survival. It was damage control, counter-strategy, and reclaiming the initiative. Hours passed in a blur of movement, analysis, and calculated risk. We traced her influence across multiple locations, each leading to minor crises she had orchestrated. Security alarms triggered, surveillance systems tampered with, and small, but deliberate, acts of intimidation to test our reactions. Each scenario forced me to adapt, make choices under pressure, and anticipate consequences that I couldn't fully see. Jamie stayed at my side, her presence both grounding and motivating. Despite everything, she trusted me completely, a faith Serena would have loved to exploit. But I refused to let her down. Every choice I made was deliberate, every risk calculated. Serena could force fractures, but she wouldn't break us. By midnight, we had pieced together a partial understanding of her plan. She wasn't acting directly, she never had to. Her manipulations, her tests, and her traps had set a chain of consequences in motion. The world she controlled wasn't physical. It was perception, trust, and environment. And now, every reaction we had made, every adaptation we had attempted, was feeding into her overarching strategy. I looked at Jamie, her eyes wide with fear and determination. "We're not done," I said firmly. "We've survived the traps so far, and we'll survive this. But Serena isn't finished. She never will be until we force her to play on our terms." Jamie nodded. "Then we make our own moves, together." I took a deep breath, preparing for the next stage. Serena's escalation had real-world consequences. The fractures she had initiated were widening, testing not just strategy and instincts, but trust, courage, and endurance. And the next confrontation, inevitable, personal, and high stakes, would define everything we had worked for. As we returned to our temporary safe house, my phone buzzed with a final chilling message for the night. "The consequences are only beginning, Ava. By tomorrow, Every decision you make will force a choice between your heart and your mission, and one will cost you everything. Pressure point. The morning air was sharp, carrying a biting edge that matched the tension coiling inside me. Sleep had been impossible. Even with Jamie beside me, even with the temporary calm, I couldn't forget Serena's words. By tomorrow, every decision you make will force a choice between your heart and your mission, and one will cost you everything. Every instinct screamed that today would be different. It wasn't just a continuation of psychological games, it was a step into real-world confrontation. And this time, the stakes weren't theoretical. The fractures she created yesterday weren't lingering threats. They were active, dangerous, immediate. Jamie stirred beside me, her hand brushing mine. "Ava, you've been up all night," she said softly, her voice wary. I forced a faint smile, though my chest was tight. "I know, but we have to be ready. Serena's next move will test everything: strategy, instinct, trust. And we can't afford mistakes." Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I'm with you, whatever happens." I appreciated the faith she had in me, but Serena's design was clear. Trust would become a weapon. Every ally, every plan, every assumption would be tested. And the person I trusted most, Jamie, was as much a part of the test as I was. I reviewed the remaining files, cross-referencing the destruction of the apartment and the last known movements of Serena's intermediaries. Every detail suggested a pattern, a method to her madness, but it was incomplete. The pieces were fragmented, intentionally. Every clue we followed seemed to lead to more questions, more uncertainty. Lucas called, urgency threading his voice. "Ava, I've monitored several anomalies overnight. Surveillance breaches, unusual traffic near key points, possible physical traps. Serena's escalation is real. She's moving from indirect manipulation to direct pressure points. Be careful. And trust your instincts, but cross-check everything." I exhaled, nodding even though he couldn't see me. "Understood. We'll move carefully. No impulsive actions." The first sign of her escalation appeared within the hour. Our safe house phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number, sending a live video feed. I hit play. Jamie's eyes widened as the feed loaded. The camera showed one of our secondary safe locations, an empty office we had been using to store backup materials. But the lights were flickering, the doors ajar. And on the floor, a single note: "You can hide, Ava, but consequences catch up. Consider this a reminder: proximity does not guarantee safety." Proofread this, my stomach twisted. It wasn't just a threat, it was evidence. Serena had infiltrated our network again, moving faster than we could predict. The fractures she had been planting now had momentum. Every step we made, every decision we took could trigger further consequences. Jamie looked at me, voice tight with fear. "Ava, what do we do?" I stepped toward the door, my mind racing. "We go there. Now, we secure the area. And we anticipate every possible trap. This is no longer about staying hidden. It's about controlling the situation, even if only partially." We moved quickly, keeping low, sticking to side streets, scanning every movement. The city seemed to have shifted overnight. Every shadow was a potential threat, every passerby a possible surveillance agent. Serena's influence was omnipresent, yet invisible. When we reached the office, the sense of intrusion was immediate. The door had been tampered with, faint scratch marks along the frame signaling forced entry, yet the interior was eerily quiet. No immediate traps, no obvious threats, but I knew better than to assume safety. I gestured for Jamie to stay back, moving carefully through the room. Every surface, every item, every corner was scanned for anomalies. Hidden triggers, surveillance devices, trip sensors, all could be part of Serena's design. My heart pounded as I traced our steps, my mind balancing caution with speed. Then I found it, a subtle movement in the shadows, barely perceptible. My instincts screamed. Serena had anticipated my analysis, leaving a decoy threat to draw my attention. I froze, assessing. The real danger was likely elsewhere, cleverly concealed. "Jamie," I whispered, "stay close, but don't move unless I tell you." She nodded, trembling slightly but obedient. Her trust fortified my resolve. I methodically checked every angle, revealing a small, hidden device, an audio recorder linked to a silent alarm. Serena had left it to monitor our reactions, to feed her understanding of our thought processes. My blood ran cold. She didn't need to be here physically. Her presence was in every calculated manipulation, every psychological nudge. I disabled the device carefully, noting the technical design. Serena's precision was impeccable, her planning exhaustive. Every step I had taken, every calculation I had made, had been anticipated. And yet, I had adapted, survived, and moved closer to taking control. Then another alert flashed on my phone, GPS movement, from one of our other safe locations. Serena had initiated a coordinated pressure point, multiple sites simultaneously compromised. Her escalation was no longer singular. It was a network of consequences designed to strain our ability to respond, to force errors. I glanced at Jamie. "We need to move again. Fast. Multiple targets, multiple pressures. Serena is forcing us to make choices in real time." Her grip tightened. "Ava, I trust you." I nodded. "We survive this together, but we have to act decisively. Hesitation will cost us everything." The next hour was a blur of movement, observation, and strategy. We navigated through multiple locations, each presenting a new set of challenges. Security breaches, minor physical hazards, and psychological cues designed to provoke fear or rash action. Serena's fingerprints were everywhere, not as a person, but as a calculated system of consequences. By late afternoon, exhaustion threatened to overtake me. Every nerve, every thought, every instinct had been tested. And yet, we had survived, adapted, and maintained control where possible. But I knew Serena's escalation was not yet complete. The fractures she had planted were deepening, and the next move would push both our strategic and emotional limits. I allowed myself a brief pause, leaning against a wall, catching my breath. Jamie stayed beside me, unwavering. "You think we can really stop her?" she asked softly. I shook my head, determination hardening. "We can't stop her completely, not yet. But we can survive, adapt, and counteract. Every move we make teaches us, strengthens us, and prepares us for the ultimate confrontation. Serena may create fractures, but she won't break us." As night fell, my phone vibrated again, a final chilling message for the day. "Tomorrow, the fractures become irreversible. One choice will demand a sacrifice, and nothing will be as it seems. Prepare yourself, Ava, your next decision will define everything." The irreversible choice. The city was quieter than usual that morning, but the silence carried a tension that made every breath feel heavy. Serena's message from the night before echoed relentlessly in my mind. "Tomorrow, the fractures become irreversible. One choice will demand a sacrifice, and nothing will be as it seems. Prepare yourself, Ava. Your next decision will define everything." I hadn't slept. Not really. Every scenario, every potential move, played on a loop in my head. Serena had escalated her game from psychological manipulation to orchestrated consequences, and now it had reached the point where hesitation could cost lives. Not just strangers or collateral damage, but Jamie, Lucas, and anyone I cared about. Jamie stirred beside me, her hand brushing mine for reassurance. "Ava, we can't keep doing this alone," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but she stayed calm enough to ground me. I nodded, taking her hand in mine. "We're not alone, but the choice I have to make, it's something I can't share, not yet. Not until I know exactly how it will play out." She gave me a small, worried smile. "Then I trust you, whatever it is, always." Her trust was a lifeline, but Serena's influence had already begun to infiltrate our perception. Every ally, every move, even Jamie's unwavering faith could be weaponized against me. The ultimate fracture wasn't physical. It was the erosion of certainty, the testing of my instincts under extreme pressure. I reviewed the remaining files on my laptop, scanning each line for overlooked clues. Every timestamp, every altered log, every faint trace of activity hinted at Serena's next move. The pattern was deliberate, methodical. She was forcing me to choose between instinct and morality, between protection and mission, between heart and duty. Then the alert came. A live feed from one of our secondary locations, the one we had hoped would remain untouched. My stomach twisted as the video loaded. Jamie's expression turned pale beside me. The feed showed a familiar figure restrained, Lucas. His eyes met mine through the camera, but he didn't speak. The note beside him read, "Ava, the choice is now. Save him or complete the mission. You can't do both. Decide wisely." I froze. Every calculation I had made up to this point suddenly became irrelevant. Serena had orchestrated the ultimate fracture, forced me to choose between my closest ally and the objective we had fought for relentlessly. Jamie gasped, "Ava, what do we do?" I gritted my teeth, trying to think clearly. My heart screamed to save Lucas. He had been my guide, my strategist, my constant support. But the mission was everything. The evidence in those files could dismantle Serena's network, prevent further destruction, and save countless lives. Every instinct, every moral compass, every shred of strategy collided in my mind. The weight of responsibility pressed down until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Serena's game was perfect. She wasn't just testing my ability to react, she was testing my soul. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to breathe, to analyze, to make a decision grounded in reason rather than panic. I thought of every prior choice, every near miss, every lesson Evelyn had taught me about anticipation and consequence. This wasn't about rushing in or blindly trusting instinct. It was about calculated sacrifice. Finally, I made my move. I grabbed the USB containing the critical evidence and began preparing the secure transmission to our allies, those who could ensure the files' immediate impact. I had chosen the mission over immediate personal safety. It was brutal, and my heart ached for Lucas. But Serena had forced this fracture, and I couldn't allow her manipulations to dictate everything. Jamie's hand tightened on mine, sensing my inner conflict. "You're doing the right thing, Ava," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but she stayed calm. "We'll get him back. We have to." I nodded, knowing she was right, but it didn't lessen the sting of the decision. My fingers worked quickly, encrypting and sending the files to our secure contacts while maintaining vigilance over Lucas's live feed. Suddenly, the screen shifted. Serena's voice came through, calm, almost gentle. "Ah, Ava, predictable yet admirable. You chose the mission over instinct, a calculated sacrifice. But don't think you're done. Choices have consequences beyond what you can see." I clenched my fists, refusing to give her satisfaction. "I won't let you control me anymore, Serena. Not like this." She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Control? No, Ava, I only guide the fractures. The rest is all you. Every decision, every hesitation, every instinct, it all becomes the instrument of your own fate." The live feed shifted again. Lucas was still restrained, but he gave me a small nod, recognition passing through his eyes. He understood my choice. He trusted me. That knowledge strengthened me, even as guilt and fear gnawed at my core. Jamie leaned close. "We'll get him back," she said, almost defiantly. Her trust reminded me of what was at stake beyond the mission, the people who believed in me, who depended on me. I allowed myself a brief pause, catching my breath, recalibrating my strategy. Serena's escalation had forced an irreversible fracture, but the next moves would require precision, cunning, and unwavering resolve. I couldn't afford hesitation, not now. I mapped out every contingency, every probable outcome, every possible reaction Serena might have to our next actions. Her network of consequences extended beyond what I could see, but I could anticipate patterns, predict behaviors, and create countermeasures. The fractures she had set in motion weren't the end, they were a test, and I intended to pass. Hours blurred as we moved, prepared, and adapted. Every step was calculated, every movement deliberate. Serena's influence was everywhere, but I was learning to anticipate her, to reclaim control, to transform fractures into leverage. By nightfall, the city felt alive with tension. The fractures were no longer theoretical. They had consequences that demanded action, courage, and unwavering precision. Lucas remained in danger. The mission continued, and Serena watched from a distance, orchestrating, manipulating, and testing. I took a deep breath, turning to Jamie. "Tomorrow, everything changes. We face the consequences of today's choice, and the stakes rise higher than ever. But we survive, we adapt, and we fight, together." Jamie nodded, unwavering. "Always." As I checked the encrypted transmissions one last time, a final message appeared on my phone, stark and chilling. "Ava, The next fracture will demand more than strategy or sacrifice. It will demand a piece of your very soul. Prepare yourself. Breaking points. The city felt heavier than ever. Shadows clung to corners, every alley seemed alive, and the distant hum of traffic carried a subtle sense of warning. Serena's message from the previous night replayed endlessly in my mind. The next fracture will demand more than strategy or sacrifice. It will demand a piece of your very soul. Prepare yourself. I hadn't slept again. Sleep was impossible. My thoughts were consumed by Lucas, the mission, and the growing realization that the fractures Serena had orchestrated weren't just external, they were internal. She had forced me into impossible choices, and now the consequences were beginning to chip away at me, at my resolve, at the very core of who I was. Jamie sat beside me, quietly observing as I reviewed the latest intelligence. Her presence was a lifeline, but it also reminded me of what was at stake. Every choice I made now could harm or protect her, could save Lucas or doom him. The weight of responsibility pressed down like a physical force, but I knew hesitation would be fatal. "Ava, we can't keep living like this," Jamie said softly, her voice steady but strained. "The pressure is too much." I exhaled slowly. "I know, but this isn't about comfort, it's about survival and strategy. Serena thrives on breaking us, but we have to adapt, stay one step ahead. That's the only way we survive." She nodded, gripping my hand. "I trust you." Her faith fortified me. Serena's manipulations were relentless, but Jamie's loyalty reminded me that some bonds could not be shattered, even by the most precise psychological warfare. I needed that reminder. Without it, I might have lost my sense of purpose. The first test arrived before noon. My phone buzzed with a live feed from an unknown source. I opened it cautiously. The screen showed Lucas, still restrained but unharmed for now. Serena's handwriting appeared on a note beside him. "Ava, every choice you've made has led here. Now, you must act under pressure. Save him directly and risk the mission, or continue the operation and watch him endure. The fractures are complete only when you choose." My heart clenched. The choice was agonizing, almost cruel in its simplicity. Save Lucas now and risk losing all progress against Serena's network, or prioritize the mission and endure the pain of watching someone I trusted suffer. Jamie's voice broke my thoughts. "Ava, what will you do?" I took a deep breath, steadying my racing mind. Serena wanted reaction, panic, hesitation, but I couldn't give her that. I weighed the options carefully. Lucas's safety was immediate, tangible, and morally unavoidable. The mission's success was critical, long-term, and abstract in comparison. Either choice carried irreversible consequences, as Serena had promised. I chose the mission. Jamie flinched slightly, understanding the weight of my decision. "You're sure?" "I have to be," I said firmly, though the ache in my chest was unbearable. "We can't let Serena control everything. The mission, the files, the intelligence, those are bigger than any single person, even Lucas." We moved quickly, following the protocols I had prepared, implementing countermeasures, and securing the remaining evidence. Every movement was calculated, precise, and deliberate. Serena's influence was everywhere, but I was learning to anticipate her, to turn her fractures into advantages, to reclaim control where possible. Hours passed in a blur of strategy, analysis, and careful movement. Each location we visited, each trap we disarmed, and each data point we secured brought us closer to our objective. But Lucas remained a constant source of distraction, guilt, and fear. Serena's genius was in creating fractures that forced impossible emotional calculations, and she had succeeded. By evening, the mission's critical components were secured. The files were transmitted to our allies, encrypted and verified. Serena's network had been compromised, disrupted, and partially dismantled. For the first time in days, I allowed myself a brief exhale of relief, but it was short-lived. My phone buzzed again. A new message. "Well done, Ava, but every action has a cost." Proofread this, the words sank in. Serena's manipulation wasn't just about controlling events. It was about shaping me, forcing me to confront my own limits, my own morality, and my own identity. The fractures she created weren't just external, they were inside me now, lingering in every thought, every hesitation, every decision. Jamie placed a hand on my shoulder. "Ava, we did it. The mission succeeded." "We?" I cut her off gently, shaking my head. "We did what we had to, but Lucas, he's still in danger. Serena hasn't let go of him. That's the next fracture we have to confront, and it won't be easy. Her grip tightened. Then we face it together. Her loyalty reminded me why I fought, why I strategized, and why I endured every psychological torment Serena had devised. We weren't just surviving, we were adapting, countering, and reclaiming power over the fractures that threatened to break us. I reviewed our remaining intelligence one last time before nightfall. Every anomaly, every threat, every potential escalation was mapped, analyzed, and anticipated. Serena's influence was vast, but I could see patterns now, understand her methods, and predict her next moves. The fractures were testing not just instinct and morality, but endurance, strategy, and emotional resilience. As darkness settled over the city, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. The mission had succeeded, but the personal cost had been severe. The fractures were not over, they were merely evolving, preparing for the next confrontation, the next impossible choice. Serena's games were far from finished. I looked at Jamie. Tomorrow, everything changes again. The fractures will deepen and the stakes rise higher than ever. We survive, adapt, and confront them, but it won't be easy. Jamie nodded, unwavering, always by your side. As we prepared for the night, a final message appeared on my phone, chilling and unavoidable. Ava, the final fracture approaches. One choice will decide not only survival, but the essence of who you are. Prepare yourself, there will be no turning back. The final fracture. The night was heavy, oppressive, a suffocating cloak that pressed down on every sense. Serena's message from the previous evening had burned into my mind, relentless and unavoidable. The final fracture approaches. One choice will decide not only survival, but the essence of who you are. Prepare yourself, there will be no turning back. I could feel the weight of that message in my chest, in my bones, and in every thought racing through my mind. Jamie sat beside me, her hand clasping mine with quiet insistence, a reminder of the stakes we had endured together. Lucas remained at Serena's mercy somewhere unknown, but I had no choice but to trust the preparations we had put in place. The mission, the network of allies, the secured files, everything led to this moment. Are you ready? Jamie whispered, her voice soft yet steady. I exhaled slowly, closing my eyes for a brief moment. I don't think anyone can ever be truly ready for what she's capable of, but we have to face it, together. The plan was clear. We had one chance to confront the fractures Serena had meticulously orchestrated. Every move we made had consequences cascading like dominoes, and the final fracture wasn't just a choice. It was a test of who I was, of every instinct, every moral boundary, every ounce of strategy I had learned from Evelyn and refined with Lucas. I moved with deliberate care, scanning our surroundings as we left the temporary safe house. The streets seemed eerily empty, almost staged, as if the city itself had become part of Serena's test. Every shadow felt alive, every distant sound a potential threat. Our first destination was one of Serena's known operational hubs, a place where critical evidence of her network had been stored, manipulated, and used against us. The files we had transmitted earlier were secure, but the hub itself contained physical evidence that could permanently dismantle her reach. As we approached, I noticed subtle anomalies immediately. Doors slightly ajar, faint scratches on walls, sensors that had been disabled with careful precision. Serena had been here, setting the stage, waiting for me to arrive. The final fracture wasn't just about choice. It was about timing, observation, and interpretation. Jamie's grip on my hand tightened. Ava, it's like she's everywhere. I nodded, scanning a small corner of the building where a hidden camera had been cleverly positioned. I deactivated it, but I knew more existed. Serena's fingerprints were everywhere, but so was the possibility of turning her design against her. Every pressure point, every trap, every manipulation could be leveraged with strategy. Inside the hub, the evidence was exactly as expected. Files, records, and devices carefully organized, but the real challenge wasn't retrieval. It was choosing the sequence of actions that would allow us to neutralize Serena without triggering irreversible consequences. And then I saw the note, unmistakable and cold. One choice remains, Ava. The files can be secured, but at the cost of someone you trust. Choose wisely, for this fracture defines you. My breath caught. Lucas's face flashed in my mind. Every thought, every instinct screamed to save him first. but I knew that rescuing him recklessly could destroy the mission, undo the progress we had made, and allow Serena to regain control. I looked at Jamie. This is it, the final fracture. Everything depends on the choice we make here now. Her eyes were steady, unwavering. You'll make the right decision, you always do. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to focus. I reviewed every scenario. Save Luca's immediately right arrow risk losing critical evidence, potentially allow Serena to continue her operations, and compromise long-term goals. Secure the file's first right arrow mission success guaranteed, but Luca's remains in danger, the personal cost unbearable. The logical, strategic choice was clear. I had to secure the evidence first. It was the one move that could permanently dismantle Serena's network and prevent further destruction. The personal cost would be immense, but it was necessary. I activated the encryption protocols, moving with precise, practiced motions. Jamie monitored the surroundings, alert for any interference, while I worked to neutralize the remaining surveillance and traps. Every second counted. Every misstep could trigger a chain reaction. The files were secured, encrypted, and transmitted. I verified the transmission, confirming that our allies had received everything safely. Serena's network, her carefully orchestrated manipulations, and her physical and digital reach were finally compromised. A small measure of triumph surged through me, but it was immediately tempered by the ache in my chest. Luca's was still in danger. The next moment brought the final test. The live feed of Luca's appeared on my portable device. His restraints had been loosened, but he was still under threat, caught in a controlled environment designed to force reaction. Serena's voice came through, smooth and taunting. "You've done well, Ava. Mission accomplished. But let's see what you're made of. Will you act to save him immediately, or do you acknowledge that some sacrifices are necessary?" I clenched my fists, the weight of choice crushing me. Every instinct screamed to act, to rush, to risk everything for him. But Serena had designed this to measure my morality, my strategy, and my resilience. The fractures were complete only when I chose correctly, when I reconciled duty with instinct. I made my move with deliberate care. I activated a pre-planned extraction protocol for Luca's, coordinated with our allies to neutralize the threats without undoing the mission's success. It was a delicate balance, a synthesis of every lesson, every calculation, every ounce of experience I had accumulated over weeks of escalation. Seconds later, Luca's appeared before me, finally freed, his expression a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Ava, you did it," he said, voice tight. I allowed myself a brief, trembling smile. "We did it together." Jamie exhaled in relief, her hand finding mine once more. "Ava, you survived the final fracture." I nodded, exhausted but resolute. Serena's influence had tested every part of me, morally, strategically, and emotionally. But the fractures, while painful, had not broken me. I had chosen duty, tempered with care for those I loved, and navigated the impossible. As night fell over the city, a quiet calm settled around us. The mission was a success, Luca's was safe, and Serena's network had been compromised, but I knew the consequences of every choice would linger. The fractures she created were not entirely gone. They had reshaped me, forced reflection, and left an indelible mark on my psyche. As we prepared to leave the hub, my phone buzzed one last time. The message was simple, chilling, and unmistakable. "Well played, Ava, but the game is never truly over. The final act approaches, and only one will emerge unbroken." Confrontation. The city was dark, almost eerily silent, as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The events of the last several weeks had led me to this moment. Every fracture, every choice, every sacrifice had been a stepping stone, a test, a trap. And now, it all culminated in a confrontation I had both anticipated and feared. Luca's walked beside me, his presence a mixture of relief and tension. After the extraction, we had moved carefully, ensuring Serena's network was disabled as much as possible. But disabling her infrastructure didn't neutralize her as a person. She was still out there, still calculating, still waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jamie trailed just behind, her eyes sharp, her hands clenched. She had been my anchor through every impossible choice, every manipulation, every fracture Serena had thrown at us. Her presence was both comforting and grounding, but it also reminded me of what was truly at stake. "We're close," I said quietly, scanning the streets ahead. The building that Serena had chosen as her staging point loomed in front of us, dark and foreboding. Every light was off, every window seemingly empty, but I knew better. Serena had a way of being everywhere and nowhere at once, a master of manipulation and control. Lucas shook his head. "I don't like this. It feels too quiet." I nodded in agreement. "Exactly. That's why we move carefully. One wrong step, and she could turn this entire situation against us." The plan was simple in theory, but impossible in execution. Confront Serena, force her hand, and finally end the psychological and strategic warfare she had waged for weeks. I had prepared for every possibility, every trap, and every manipulation. But I also knew that Serena thrived on the unexpected. We entered the building through a side entrance I had scouted earlier. The air inside was heavy with tension, the faint smell of machinery and dust mixing with something sharper. Metal, maybe, or the remnants of chemicals I couldn't identify. Shadows stretched across the walls as our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing corridors lined with closed doors and hidden panels. "This is it," Jamie whispered. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." I swallowed, feeling the weight of those words settle into my chest. She was right. Every fracture Serena had created was designed to test us, to push us to breaking points. But I had learned to anticipate, adapt, and control what I could. The final fracture wasn't just about strategy. It was about understanding her, seeing through her manipulations, and confronting the core of her psyche. We reached a central chamber, a large, open room with minimal furniture but signs of heavy use. Monitors, scattered files, and a single chair in the center facing an empty wall. And then I saw her. Serena stepped out from the shadows, her presence commanding and unnervingly calm. She wore that same cold smile, the one that had haunted so many of my nightmares. "Ah, Ava," she said, her voice smooth, almost melodic. "I wondered when you would arrive. You've done well to come this far, truly. But now, the final act begins." I squared my shoulders. "It's over, Serena. Your games end tonight." She laughed softly, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "End. Oh, Ava, the end is just another beginning. Every fracture you've faced has shaped you, molded you. And now, you must decide. Not the mission, not Lucas, not anyone else, but you. Who will you be when this is finished?" The air was electric, charged with tension. Every instinct screamed at me to act, to rush, to neutralize her immediately, but I forced myself to remain calm. Serena thrived on panic and impulsive decisions. I would not give her that satisfaction. "Your manipulations, your fractures, they won't control me," I said steadily. "I've learned from every choice, every sacrifice. This ends on my terms." Her smile widened, almost approving. "Impressive, but can you truly end it without consequence? Can you walk away intact, morally and strategically? That is the ultimate fracture, Ava." Lucas stepped forward. "She's right, Ava, but we trust you. Whatever you choose, we're with you." Jamie added, "We've survived everything else. We survived this too." I nodded, drawing strength from their unwavering faith. The final fracture wasn't just about confronting Serena. It was about confronting myself, acknowledging the sacrifices I had made, and taking control of the outcome rather than reacting to her design. I moved toward her cautiously, every step measured. Serena remained still, almost daring me to make a mistake. And then she lunged, sudden, precise, her movements as calculated as I had expected. But I was ready. I anticipated her strike, sidestepped, and countered with a maneuver I had practiced countless times. The confrontation became a blur of movement, strategy, and mental fortitude. Every strike, every dodge, every calculated action was a test, not just of skill, but of resilience, morality, and control. Serena forced me to weigh each move carefully, to consider consequences, and to anticipate her manipulations. Finally, after what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, I disarmed her, pushing her back against the wall. She raised her hands, a gesture of mock surrender, but her eyes betrayed her intent. She would not give up. You've adapted," she said, her voice quieter now, almost grudgingly respectful. "You've survived the fractures, but can you survive the aftermath?" I stood tall, every ounce of strength and strategy focused on this moment. "I will survive, not just the fractures you created, but myself, my choices, and the people I care about. This ends tonight, Serena, one way or another." Her lips curved into a final, enigmatic smile. Very well, Ava. Let's see who truly remains unbroken. As the confrontation reached its peak, a sudden explosion of lights and alarms erupted throughout the facility. Serena's final trap had been triggered, and I realized with a cold certainty that the ultimate fracture, the one that would test every part of me, was not just about strategy or morality. It was about survival itself. Resolution. Proofread this. The alarms blared, red lights flashing across the facility, and every corridor seemed to twist into an endless maze of danger. Serena's final trap had ignited, a chaotic mix of pressure plates, electronic locks, and hidden explosives. My heart pounded, but I forced myself to focus, to breathe, to remember every lesson, every fracture, every choice that had brought me to this moment. Lucas and Jamie flanked me, both tense but ready. We had come so far together, endured so much, and now every ounce of skill, strategy, and trust would be tested. I could see the strain in their eyes, but also the unwavering faith they had in me. That faith was a lifeline. Without it, I would have faltered long ago. Keep moving, I instructed, my voice calm but firm. Every step counts. Watch the floor, the walls, everything could trigger a chain reaction. The corridors twisted unpredictably, the facility seeming almost alive with Serena's manipulations. Every door we passed could be a trap, every shadow a hidden threat. But I had prepared for this. Every fracture she had designed, every manipulation, every escalation, I had studied, anticipated, and turned it into a blueprint for survival. We reached a central chamber, a vast, open space where the remaining devices hummed ominously, the source of the alarms and the traps. Serena stood at the far end, arms crossed, her expression calm, almost amused. "Ah, Ava," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You've made it. Impressive. But now comes the ultimate fracture, the one that decides everything. Survival, morality, control. Who will you be when this is over?" I swallowed, steadying myself. "I will be the person I've fought to become, not your puppet, not your creation. I'm ending this on my terms." She tilted her head, her smile sharp. "We shall see." Suddenly, the floor beneath us shifted, revealing a complex network of pressure-sensitive plates, each one capable of triggering explosions. The alarms intensified, the lights flickered, and the room seemed to shrink around us. Serena's final trap was not just about strategy, it was a test of composure, of control under extreme pressure. "Plan," Lucas asked, tension in his voice. I scanned the room quickly, mapping out a safe path in my mind. "Follow me, step carefully, trust my lead, and don't rush. One wrong move." I didn't finish the sentence, but they understood. One misstep could mean death. We moved deliberately, my eyes flicking from floor to ceiling, noting every anomaly, every potential hazard. Serena watched, her expression unreadable, yet I could feel the calculation behind her gaze. She wanted me to falter, to panic, to make a mistake, but I would not give her that satisfaction. Halfway across, a panel on the wall burst open, releasing a cloud of gas. I grabbed Jamie, pulling her down while Lucas rolled to the side. Coughing, we adjusted, recalibrated our steps, and continued. The traps were relentless, but so was I. Each obstacle became part of the puzzle I had to solve. Finally, we reached the central console, Serena's command hub for the facility. Wires snaked across the floor, lights blinking erratically, systems primed to explode. I leaned over, analyzing the configuration. Every wire, every circuit, every trigger, this was her final fracture, and it demanded precise, calculated action. "Cover me," I instructed, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Lucas and Jamie positioned themselves strategically, ready to neutralize any surprise. I began disconnecting circuits, rerouting power, disabling triggers, working with careful precision. Sweat dripped down my forehead, my mind racing with calculations, contingency plans, and the moral weight of the decisions I'd made along the way. Every fracture had led to this one moment, the culmination of strategy, morality, and survival instincts. Serena's voice echoed through the chamber. "Careful, Ava. One wrong move and everything you fought for gone." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every second mattered. The room hummed with tension, each moment stretching into eternity. Finally, with one last precise maneuver, I disengaged the final circuit. The alarm ceased, the light stabilized, and the facility fell silent, eerily calm in the aftermath. Serena's expression shifted, shock, disbelief, a flicker of admiration. You've done it," she murmured, almost to herself. Then, with a sharp inhale, she made a move toward the exit. But security measures we had activated earlier ensured she couldn't escape. The fractures she had created were finally neutralized. I stepped forward, cautious but resolute. "It's over, Serena. The fractures, the games, everything ends tonight." She looked at me one last time, her cold smile returning. "Perhaps, but the fractures don't just end, they linger. Even when you think you've survived, they leave their mark." I watched her escorted away, knowing she would no longer hold the same power over me or anyone else. The mission, the network, the manipulation, it was finally over. Lucas exhaled deeply. "I can't believe it's done." Jamie's hand found mine, squeezing it firmly. "You did it, Ava. You survived the fractures and came out stronger. We all did." I allowed myself a small, weary smile. "We did, and we'll recover, slowly, carefully. But we survived, and that's what matters." We walked out of the facility together, the night air crisp and liberating. The city, once oppressive and threatening, now seemed quiet and safe. The fractures Serena had created had tested every part of us, morally, emotionally, strategically. But we had endured. I had endured. As we paused at the edge of the city, I looked back at the dark silhouette of the facility. The battles, the choices, the fractures, they had left marks on me that I knew would never fully fade. But I was stronger, wiser, and more resilient because of them. "Do you think it's truly over?" Lucas asked quietly, his hand brushing mine. I shook my head slowly, thoughtful. "Maybe not entirely. The fractures may be gone, but the lessons, the vigilance, that remains. And I have a feeling that, somewhere out there, Serena isn't finished." Jamie nodded. "Then we stay ready, together." I inhaled deeply, letting the cool night air fill my lungs. The fractures had tested us, broken us, reshaped us, but they hadn't defeated us. And as I stared into the darkness, I felt a subtle, persistent thought, a whisper of anticipation. The future would hold new challenges, new fractures, and new choices. But this time, I would be ready. And so, with Lucas and Jamie beside me, I stepped forward into the night, carrying the weight of the past, the strength of survival, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, I would face it and endure.